I watched my own twin sister marry my fated mate. I stood in the back in a cheap dress while everyone cheered for her. I thought my story was over, until the Alpha King walked past my sister, ignored her completely, and bowed before me instead. Chapter 1. The Disposable Daughter. The morning of Celeste's wedding, I woke up tasting copper, not blood, though I'd bitten through my lip enough times in the past 6 months that the flavor had become familiar. No. This was the metallic tang of swallowed words, of screams that had corroded somewhere between my chest and throat, eating through tissue until silence became another organ inside me. I sat up in the narrow servant's bed they'd moved me to after the engagement announcement. My old room, the one I'd shared with Celeste since birth, now belonged to her alone. She needed space for all the wedding gifts, Mother had explained. High, her eyes sliding past me like I was a thumbprint, smudge on glass she'd wipe away later. The dress hung on the back of my door. Ivory silk with silver threading I'd spent 4 months embroidering by candlelight. Each tiny stitch a meditation, a prayer, a small act of self-destruction. The pattern depicted wolves running through moonlight, a tribute to our kind, to the shifting magic that ran through shifter bloodlines like rivers of starlight. Everyone else's bloodlines. Anyway, I pressed my palm against my stomach, against the hollow place where my wolf should have lived. 23 years old, and I'd never felt the change. Never experienced the sacred transformation that marked someone as whole, as worthy, as real in the eyes of our people. The medical term was shifting nullification syndrome, rare, incurable. The colloquial term was much simpler, broken, and broken wolves didn't get mates, not real ones. Anyway, except the moon goddess apparently had a sick sense of humor, because 6 months ago at the Harvest Festival I'd felt it. That snap of recognition, that soul-deep knowing that stole the breath from my lungs and rewrote every cell in my body. I'd looked across the bonfire and seen him, Carol Blackwater, son of the Southern Pax Beta, with eyes like winter storms and a smile that seemed meant for me alone. For 3 perfect heartbeats, I'd felt whole. Then Celeste had stepped into his line of sight, and I'd watched his expression transform into the exact same devastating recognition. The mate bonded, but aimed at her, at my identical twin, who could shift into a silver wolf so beautiful that people wept, who had everything I didn't, including apparently my soulmate Raina. My mother's voice cut through the door, not a knock. She didn't knock anymore. The seamstress needs you in the preparation room. Celeste's train needs adjustment. Of course it did. I pulled on yesterday's clothes. The simple gray dress I wore for chores and errands. The one that made me invisible, exactly as intended. The cathedral's preparation room smelled like jasmine and lies. Celeste stood on a raised platform, radiant in the gown I'd designed, but she'd taken credit for the neckline I'd suggested. The lace overlay I'd hand-stitched during nights when sleep felt like giving up. Around her, women buzzed like devoted bees, adjusting, praising, worshipping. She met my eyes in the mirror. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt, pity. Then it smoothed into the serene mask she'd perfected. Raina, thank the goddess. This train keeps catching. She gestured to the cathedral-length silk trailing behind her. Can you pin it? You always know exactly how. Because I'd made it. Because I knew every seam, every thread, every place where the fabric wanted to fold. I knelt, pins between my teeth, and began the work of perfecting her day. You look beautiful, I said. Because that's what Sister said. What good Sister said. I'm so nervous. Celeste's laugh was musical, pitched for the audience of bridesmaids. What if I trip? What if I say the wrong words during the vows? What if you're marrying my mate? And we both know it, but I smiled and adjusted the bustle. You'll be perfect. You always are. That at least was true. The door opened and my father entered Alpha Theron Gates. Leader of the Northern Pack, a man carved from duty and disappointment. He'd aged a decade in the 6 months since Celeste's engagement. Hosting the Beta's son was an honor. But everyone knew the whispers, that the bride should have been both daughters, that twins shared everything, that my failure to shift had our family's value. His eyes found me kneeling on the floor and something tightened in his jaw. Celeste, you should prepare yourself. The ceremony begins in an hour. He paused. Raina, come with me. Celeste's hand twitched toward me in a boarded gesture of what? Comfort? Warning. But she let me go. My father led me through the cathedral's back corridors, past the kitchens where staff prepared the feast, past the gallery where pack members would soon gather. We ended up in his private study, a room that smelled like old leather and older regrets. He closed the door, didn't look at me. Alpha King Ronan arrives within the hour. I blinked. The Alpha King, sovereign of all packs, the apex predator who ruled from the northern mountains, whom most wolves lived entire lives without meeting for the wedding. Yes. My father's voice was flat, and he's requested a private audience with our family before the ceremony. My brags, something cold slithered down my spine. Why? Finally, my father turned. His eyes held an exhaustion I'd never seen before, the kind that spoke of impossible choices and sacrifices that left scars on the soul. The king has no mate, no heir. He's been searching for 5 years. He paused. He's aware of your condition. The room tilted. What are you saying? He's interested in a political match. A marriage that would elevate our pack, secure our position. My father's hands flexed at his sides. He doesn't need a shifter queen. He needs someone loyal, educated, someone who understands duty, someone broken who should be grateful. I'm not. My voice cracked. Father, I can't. You can and you will if he chooses you now. His tone hardened into the alpha command I'd heard him use on subordinates. This family has sheltered you, fed you, loved you despite your limitations. Celeste is fulfilling her duty by creating an alliance with the Southern Pack. This is yours. The words landed like stones despite your limitations. This is yours. Not a choice, a transaction. What if I refuse? The question escaped before I could stop it. My father's expression didn't change. Then you'll leave this pack after the wedding. I've arranged a position for you in the Western Territories, a scribe for their historical archives. It's generous, considering. He moved toward the door. The king will meet us in the East Chapel in 20 minutes. Make yourself presentable. He left. I stood alone in the study, surrounded by the books I'd read as a child. The desk where he taught me pack history and politics. The window that looked out onto the training grounds where Celeste had first shifted, and I'd realized I never would. Make yourself presentable. I looked down at my gray dress, at my unmanicured hands, at the body that had betrayed me in every possible way. In an hour, Celeste would marry the man the moon goddess had marked for me, and I would be offered to a king-like livestock, valuable only for what political advantages my family name could purchase. The copper taste returned, flooding my mouth. I'd spent my whole life being good, being quiet, being grateful for the scraps of love thrown my way. And this was my reward. A choice between exile or becoming property. I walked to the window and pressed my forehead against the cold glass. Outside, guests were arriving, elegant shifters in formal wear, laughing and embracing, celebrating a love story that had consumed mine like fire eating paper. Somewhere in the cathedral, Celeste was probably wondering where I'd gone. If I'd finished pinning her dress. If I'd stand beside her during the ceremony and smile while my heart was buried alive. A knock at the door, Miss Raina. A servant's voice apologetic. The Alpha King has arrived early. Your father requests your immediate presence. I closed my eyes. Goodness doesn't make you worthy. It makes you convenient. I'm coming, I said, and I turned away from the window, away from the last shred of choice I might ever have, and walked toward whatever fresh hell was waiting in the East Chapel. Chapter 2. The King's Bargain. The East Chapel was smaller than the main cathedral, an intimate space designed for private ceremonies and confessions. Stained glass windows filtered autumn sunlight, into fragments of crimson and gold, painting the stone floor with broken beauty. My father stood near the altar, his posture military straight. Beside him, my mother wrung her hands, her usual composure fractured into something almost human, and between them, commanding the space like gravity itself had shifted to accommodate him, stood Alpha King Ronan. I'd seen paintings, heard descriptions whispered with equal parts reverence and terror. None of it had prepared me for the reality. He was tall, taller than any shifter I'd ever encountered, with shoulders that suggested violence contained rather than absent. His hair was black as midnight water, pulled back from a face that seemed carved by something angry. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, lips pressed into a line that suggested smiling was a language he'd forgotten. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath, pale gold, almost colorless, like sunlight through winter ice. Wolf eyes, even in human form. They found me the moment I entered, and I felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing, assessing, calculating. Not cruel but not kind either. The look of someone appraising an investment. "Your Majesty," I managed, dropping into the curtsy I'd been taught as a child. "I'm honored." "Don't." His voice was low, textured like smoke over gravel. "I have enough people lying to me today." I froze halfway through, rising uncertain. He moved closer, each step deliberate. The scent of him reached me, pine and cold mountain air, something wild that made my hindbrain scream both danger and safety in the same breath. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. I raised my eyes. He studied my face with an intensity that felt invasive, like he was reading a text written on my bones. "You're the broken one." Not a question, a statement. And somehow from his lips it didn't sound like an insult, just a fact. Neutral as commenting on hair color. "Yes, Your Majesty." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I cannot shift. I have no wolf. Why?" The question startled me. People didn't usually ask why. They just knew or assumed or pied. "I don't know," I admitted. "The healers say my body is healthy." "The magic simply, isn't there?" "It never was." Something flickered in those gold eyes. "And your twin can shift beautifully." That must be difficult. The observation landed like a blade between my ribs, not because it was cruel, but because it was true, and no one ever acknowledged it. They expected me to be happy for Celeste. Proud, supportive. "It is what it is," I said carefully. A diplomatic answer. His lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Your father tells me you're educated, that you've studied pack law, history, 6 languages, and strategy. I had more time than most, because I wasn't training with the other young wolves. Wasn't learning to hunt, or fight, or do any of the things that made shifters. Books don't require claws. No, they require something rarer, patience and intelligence." He turned to my father. "Leave us." My mother made a small sound of protest. "Your Majesty, propriety. I'm the king. I am propriety." He didn't raise his voice, but the command in it was absolute. "Go." My parents exchanged a look. My father's hand found my mother's elbow, and they left. The door closed with a finality that made my pulse spike. Alone. I was alone with the most powerful shifter in existence. In a chapel that suddenly felt much smaller, King Ronan walked to one of the stained glass windows, his back to me. "I'm going to be direct. Reyna Gates, because I suspect you're tired of people dancing around truth." "Yes, Your Majesty, I need a queen. Not a mate. I had one of those. She died 3 years ago in childbirth along with our son." His voice didn't waver, but something in the air shifted, grew heavier. "The council has been pressuring me to remarry, to produce an heir, to maintain stability." My throat tightened. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Are you?" He glanced over his shoulder. "Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear?" The question felt like a test. I decided on honesty. I had so little left to lose. Both. I am sorry because losing loved ones is agony. I understand. But yes, I'm also saying what seems appropriate because I've been trained my entire life to smooth social situations and make powerful people comfortable. I paused. "Is that direct enough, Your Majesty?" For the first time, he smiled. It transformed his face from intimidating to something almost human, though no less dangerous. Better. He turned fully toward me. I don't need love, Rhea. I had that. It destroyed me when I lost it, and I won't be destroyed again. What I need is a partner. Someone intelligent enough to manage court politics, strategic enough to navigate alliances, and strong enough to endure the scrutiny that comes with being queen. And someone who can't shift, I added quietly. His expression shifted surprise, perhaps, that I'd said it aloud. Yes, he admitted. Someone the council will underestimate. Someone they'll assume is weak, controllable, irrelevant. He moved closer again, and I forced myself not to step back. But you're not weak, are you? You're something far more dangerous. You're adaptable. You've survived in a world that told you you were worthless, and you're still standing. The words burrowed under my skin, finding places that hurt and soothing them with recognition I'd never expected. What exactly are you offering your majesty? A marriage, political, practical, and permanent. He held my gaze. You would be queen of all Pax. You'd have wealth, power, protection, everything. You've been denied because of an accident of biology, and in return you fulfill the role, attend state functions, produce heirs if possible, though that's not a requirement. His voice dropped. And you give me loyalty. Real loyalty, not the performance of it. I have enough people who bow and scheme. I need someone who will tell me the truth. Even when it's uncomfortable, my mind raced. This was everything my father wanted, a strategic alliance, elevation for our pack. But it was also a cage, gilded and vast, but still a cage. Why me? The question escaped. You could have anyone, someone who can shift, someone beautiful. Your sister is beautiful, he interrupted. She's also marrying someone else in approximately 30 minutes. And beauty is easy to find, Rhea. Intelligence combined with desperation is much rarer. The word desperation hung between us, like an accusation. You think I'm desperate? I think you're practical. Your father has given you a choice. Marry me or face exile. He was quite clear about that. King Ronan's expression didn't change. So yes, you're desperate, but so am I. The council grows bolder. There are whispers of challenges to my authority, questions about my fitness to rule without an heir. I need to secure my position, and I need to do it now. He was right. I was desperate, and he was using that desperation like a lever, prying open my options until only one remained. But there was something else in his words, something underneath the cold strategy. I won't be destroyed again. What happened to your mate? I asked softly. If I may, his jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then she was kind, gentle, everything a Luna should be. His voice went distant. The pregnancy was difficult. The healer said she was too fragile, that carrying a shifter child might kill her. I told her we'd wait, that we'd find another way. He paused. She didn't listen. She thought giving me an heir was more important than her own life. And she was right. In a way, she died doing her duty. The child didn't survive either. The pain in those words was buried deep, compressed under years of control. But I heard it anyway. That's why you don't want love, I said quietly. Because it failed you. Because it's a luxury I can't afford. He met my eyes again. I'm offering you a transaction, Rhea. Clean, clear, honest, no false promises of romance. No pretending this is anything other than what it is, a strategic alliance. It should have felt cold, clinical. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to me in months. I need to know something. I said, if I agree, if I marry, you will. You expect me to pretend to play the part of the devoted wife in public? In public, yes, the court needs to see unity. But in private, he tilted his head. I'll expect you to be exactly what you are. No performances, no masks, and if I can't give you an heir, if I'm as broken inside as I am outside, then we'll address it if needed. There are ways adoption, designating successors. It's a problem for later, if it's a problem at all. He stepped closer, near enough that I could see the faint scars along his jawline, marks from battles I'd never know. I won't love you, Rhea, but I will respect you, protect you, give you a life where your worth isn't measured by your ability to shift. It was the kindest offer I'd ever received, wrapped in the coldest words. Behind us, bells began to toll the signal that the ceremony would begin soon. Celeste ceremony, my mate's wedding to my twin. I need an answer, King Ronan said. Now. I thought of Celeste in the dress I'd made, radiant and whole. Of Carol, who'd looked at her with the recognition that was supposed to be mine, of my father's exhaustion, my mother's disappointment, the servant's bed I'd been relegated to. I thought of exile, a life of solitude in the Western Territories, cataloging other people's histories while having none of my own. And I thought of this man before me, this king who'd loved and lost and built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to be vulnerable, who was offering me not love, but something possibly more valuable. A place where I could exist without apology. I have conditions, I heard myself say. His eyebrows rose fractionally. Bold, you said you needed someone honest, someone who'd tell you uncomfortable truths. I lifted my chin. That starts now. A pause. Then I'm listening. I want my own space. Rooms that are mine, where I can be alone when I need to be. I was shaking, but I kept going. I want access to the royal archives. Full access, not the public sections. And I want autonomy. I'll fulfill my duties as queen, but I won't be your puppet. I'll speak my mind even if you don't like what I say. Silence stretched between us. I'd overstepped. I'd asked too much. He'd withdraw the offer and I'd be left with nothing. Then King Ronan smiled, a real smile this time. Sharp and approving. Done. He extended his hand. Well, announce the engagement after your sister's ceremony. Let her have her moment. But by tonight, you'll be my betrothed. I stared at his hand. Taking it meant choosing. Meant walking away from the last threads connecting me to the life I'd known. The family who'd failed me. The mate who'd never been mine. It meant becoming someone new. I took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, anchoring. One more thing, I said. I want the truth from you always. If you're going to use me as a political tool, I need to know. No surprises. Agreed. He didn't release my hand, and I expect the same. If you're unhappy, if something isn't working, you tell me. We may not love each other, Reyna, but we'll be honest. That's worth more than most marriages have, the bells told again. Closer now. We should go, he said. Your sister's wedding awaits. Yes. I pulled my hand back, felt the loss of warmth. Your Majesty, Ronan. When we're alone, call me Ronan. The informality felt strange, intimate in a way the marriage proposal hadn't. Ronan, I tested the name. Thank you for not lying to me. Thank you for not lying to yourself. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Reyna, your family is making a mistake, treating you as disposable. Their loss will be my gain. He left, leaving me alone in the chapel with stained glass saints and the ghost of the future I'd just chosen. I pressed my hand against my stomach, against the empty place where my wolf should have been. You're not weak. You're adaptable. Maybe he was right. Maybe surviving had made me stronger than shifting ever could have. The door opened again. My mother, her face pinched with anxiety. Well, she demanded. What did he say? I looked at her. This woman who'd carried me, raised me, and then slowly started looking through me when I failed to meet her expectations. He asked me to marry him, I said quietly. I said, yes. Her gasp was audible. Reyna, that's the pack. This is wonderful. Is it? I moved past her toward the door. I need to help Celeste finish preparing. She'll be walking down the aisle soon, but we need to discuss later. I kept walking through the corridors toward the preparation room where my twin waited in her perfect dress for her perfect day. And with every step I felt the old Reyna, the grateful, quiet, convenient one, falling away like a skin I'd outgrown. By tonight, I would be betrothed to a king. By tonight, everything would change. The only question was whether I'd survive the transformation. Chapter 3. The Wedding and the Vow. The main cathedral had transformed into something from a dream or a nightmare, depending on where you stood. White roses climbed every pillar, their perfume so thick it felt like drowning in sweetness. Candles flickered in silver holders, casting dancing shadows across the vaulted ceiling. The pews overflowed with pack members dressed in their finest, their excitement a palpable hum in the air. I stood in the preparation room's doorway, watching Celeste examine herself in the full-length mirror. She was perfection, incarnate, the dress I'd made, hugged her curves before flowing into that dramatic train, her silver blonde hair styled in intricate braids woven with pearls, her makeup emphasizing eyes that sparkled with anticipation. She looked like every bride should look, radiant, hopeful, loved. Reina. She turned and her smile faltered when she saw my face. "What's wrong?" "You look different. I just agreed to marry a king. I'm about to watch you marry my mate. Everything is wrong and nothing will ever be the same." "Nothing," I said, "just emotional." "It's your wedding day." She crossed to me, took my hands. Her touch was warm, familiar. We'd shared a womb, shared a childhood, shared everything until the day she shifted and I didn't. "I know this is hard for you," she whispered, with Carol and the mate bond and everything. "I never wanted. Don't." I squeezed her hands, then released them. "This isn't about what you wanted. The moon goddess makes her choices. Who are we to question?" It was the right thing to say. The gracious thing. It tasted like ashes. Celeste's eyes glistened. "You're the best sister anyone could ask for. I don't deserve you." "You're right, you don't, but I smiled because that's what I've been trained to do. You deserve to be happy, and you will be. Carol is a good man. He is." She glanced back at her reflection. "Sometimes I catch him looking at you, though. With this expression I can't quite read. Do you think?" She stopped herself. "Never mind, I'm being paranoid. I'm Has." My heart clenched. "Of course." Carol looked at me. "The mate. Bond didn't just disappear because it was inconvenient. It lingered. A phantom limb we'd both learned to ignore." "You're not paranoid," I said gently. "You're nervous. That's normal." I adjusted a loose strand of her hair. "But Celeste, he chose you. Every day he chooses you. That's more powerful than any bond the moon goddess could create." It was possibly the most generous lie I'd ever told. She hugged me suddenly, fiercely. "I love you, Ray. No matter what happens, you know that, right?" I held her, memorizing the feeling. After today, everything would be different. After today, I'd be the king's betrothed and Celeste would be married, and the strange twin ship we'd navigated for 23 years would shift into something new and unknowable. "I love you too," I whispered and meant it. Despite everything, a knock at the door. "Ladies, it's time." The ceremony was beautiful in the way funerals are beautiful, carefully orchestrated, emotionally devastating, and impossible to escape. I stood in the front row beside my mother, watching Celeste glide down the aisle on my father's arm. The congregation stood, murmuring appreciation. Somewhere behind me, I heard whispers, so beautiful. A perfect match. The goddess truly blessed them. And at the altar, Carol waited. He wore traditional ceremonial robes in deep blue, his dark hair styled back from a face that was almost painfully handsome. But it was his expression that cut me the way his entire being seemed to orient toward Celeste like a compass finding north. The way his eyes tracked her every step with something that looked dangerously close to worship. He loved her. That was the cruelest part. Not that the bond had snapped to her instead of me, but that real love had grown from it. They weren't just mates. They were in love, and I was happy for them, devastated for myself. Both truths existed simultaneously, shredding me from the inside. Celeste reached the altar. My father lifted her veil, kissed her forehead, then placed her hand in Carol's. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, Carol's eyes found mine over my sister's shoulder. The mate bond flickered, a ghost of recognition. His expression cracked just slightly. "I'm sorry," it said. "I'm so sorry." I gave him the smallest nod. "I know. I forgive you." Then he looked back at Celeste, and the moment shattered. the officiant began the ceremony, his voice resonating through the cathedral. I stopped listening to the words. They were just sounds, ritual phrases that held no meaning for me. Instead, I let my mind drift, seeking the numbness I'd cultivated over months of watching this day approach. But I couldn't find it, not today. Because in the back of the cathedral, silent as shadow, stood Alpha King Ronan. He'd changed from the formal traveling clothes he'd worn earlier into ceremonial robes of midnight black and silver thread. Even from this distance, I felt the weight of his presence. The way the rooms seemed to unconsciously orient around him, the way pack members' attention kept sliding toward him before darting away, too intimidated to stare directly. He was watching me, not the ceremony, not the beautiful bride or the handsome groom. Me standing in my plain gray dress among the splendor, holding myself together with pure stubbornness. Our eyes met across the crowded cathedral, and something passed between us. Not attraction, I wasn't naive enough to call it that, but recognition perhaps, an acknowledgement that we'd made our bargain, and there was no turning back. He inclined his head, barely perceptible. I returned the gesture, a contract sealed in silent understanding. Pronounce you, mated and married, bound by the moon goddess and pack law. The officiant's words snapped me back to the present. Carol cupped Celeste's face and kissed her tender, loving, everything a first kiss between mates should be. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. I clapped too, mechanically, watching my twin sister glow with happiness that should have been mine. It's done, I thought. Finally, it's done. But I was wrong. The worst part wasn't the ceremony. It was what came after. The reception filled the pack's great hall. A massive space decorated with yet more flowers, glittering with candlelight and laughter. Long tables groaned under elaborate dishes. Musicians played traditional mating songs, and shifters danced with the uninhibited joy of people celebrating love. I found a corner table and made myself small, nursing a glass of wine I had no intention of finishing. From here, I could watch without participating my preferred mode of existence. Celeste and Carol moved through the crowd like the sun and moon, radiant and perfectly matched. She laughed at something he whispered in her ear, and he spun her into an impromptu dance, and everyone watched them with the kind of adoration reserved for fairy tales come to life. They're quite the couple, I startled. King Ronan had appeared beside me without sound, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He offered one. Your Majesty. I accepted the glass. I didn't realize you'd be staying for the reception. Ronan, he corrected, his voice low enough that only I could hear. And I'm staying because we have an announcement to make. He glanced at the happy couple, though perhaps we should wait until they've had their first dance. No need to completely eclipse their moment. Guilt flickered. This will destroy her happiness. Will it? He sipped his champagne. Your sister is marrying her mate. She'll be thrilled for you. Or she should be if she's half as loving as everyone claims. I thought of Celeste's earlier words. I know this is hard for you. She knew on some level. She'd always known what this cost me. She'll worry, I said. Instead, she'll think I'm being forced. Are you? The question hung between us. I looked up at him. This king who'd offered me escape, wrapped in chains, freedom bound by duty. I don't know, I admitted. Does it count as force if the alternative is exile? If staying means watching my mate live happily with my sister while I grow old in the room they relegated me to? No. His gold eyes were steady. That's not force. That's survival. And there's no shame in choosing to survive. The word settled something inside me. Some frantic, guilty thing that had been screaming since I'd accepted his proposal. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? For not pretending this is something it's not. For not trying to convince me I should be grateful or honored, or you should be neither. He set down his glass. I'm asking you to do something incredibly difficult. Marry a stranger. Become queen. Leave everything you've known. The fact that you're willing to try speaks to your strength, not my generosity." Before I could respond, my father's voice boomed across the hall. Distinguished guests, family, and friends. Alpha Theron stood at the head table, glass raised. If I could have your attention for a moment, the music faded. Conversations quieted. Every face turned toward my father. This was it, the announcement. My hands began to shake. I set down the champagne before I could drop it. Ronan's hand found the small of my back barely touching just enough to ground me. "Breathe," he murmured. "You've survived worse than this, had I?" I genuinely didn't know. "Today, we celebrate the union of my daughter Celeste and Carol Blackwater," my father continued, his alpha voice carrying to every corner. "But we have another joyous announcement to make." Celeste looked confused, glancing at Carol, who shrugged. My father's eyes found mine across the crowd. For just a moment, something soft crossed his face. Pride, perhaps, or sadness, or both. "My other daughter, Rhea, has also been blessed by fortune." He gestured toward where Ronan and I stood. "Alpha King Ronan has honored our pack, honored our family by requesting Rhaena's hand in marriage." Silence crashed over the hall like a physical thing. Every head swiveled, every eye found me. Standing in my gray dress next to the king in his midnight robes, I watched the emotions ripple through the crowd. Shock, disbelief, calculation. Someone whispered, "The broken one." Another voice hissed, "She can't even shift." But Ronan stepped forward, drawing attention like gravity, and the whispers died. "I've chosen Rhaena Gates as my queen," he said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who'd never been questioned. "She possesses the intelligence, strength, and character required for the role. Any who doubt my choice doubt my judgment, and I trust that won't be an issue." The threat underlying those words was silk-wrapped, but unmistakable. "Furthermore," Ronan continued, "she's accepted my proposal of her own free will. I want that explicitly clear. This is her choice, not her father's command or my coercion." "Rhea," he extended his hand toward me. Every eye in the hall locked onto that outstretched hand. An invitation, a test, a public declaration I could refuse. Even now, I could walk away, accept exile, disappear into obscurity. Or I could step forward into a life I'd never imagined, beside a man I didn't love, into a role I'd never prepared for. I thought of Celeste in her wedding dress, radiant and whole. I thought of Carol's apologetic eyes. I thought of my mother's disappointment and my father's exhaustion, and the servant's bed I'd been sleeping in for 6 months. And I thought of Ronan's words. "You're not weak. You're adaptable." I took his hand. The crowd gasped. Whether in approval or horror, I couldn't tell. But Ronan pulled me closer, his grip steady, anchoring to new beginnings. He said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then softer, just for me. "You did well." The hall erupted, some in applause, others in frantic whispers. My father was beaming with political triumph. My mother looked torn between joy and concern, and Celeste, she'd gone pale, her hand clutching Carol's arm. Our eyes met across the crowd, and in her expression, I saw a dozen emotions: surprise, confusion, guilt, and something that might have been relief. Now she doesn't have to worry about me, I realized. Now I have my own future. She mouthed something that looked like, "Are you sure?" I nodded once. "Yes, I'm sure." It was possibly the first time I'd been sure of anything in years. Carol leaned down, whispered something to Celeste. She nodded. And together they crossed the hall toward us. The married couple approaching the newly betrothed. A symmetry that would have been poetic if it weren't so painful. "Congratulations," Carol said, his voice strained but genuine. He extended his hand to Ronan, who shook it with the easy authority of someone who feared nothing. "And to you both," Ronan replied smoothly. "May your union bring strength to your packs." The formal words hung between them. Two alphas exchanging pleasantries while carefully not acknowledging the bizarre tangle of fate that had brought us all to this moment. Celeste threw her arms around me, heedless of protocol. "Rye, is this really what you want?" I hugged her back, breathing in her familiar scent. Jasmine and honey. Yes, I promise. But you barely know him, and being queen, that's so much pressure. I know. I pulled back, held her shoulders, but Celeste, I can't stay here, not anymore. This is my chance to be something other than the twin who can't shift. Her eyes filled with tears. You were never just that to me. I know. I did know, despite everything, but I need to be more than that to myself. She nodded, understanding, even if she couldn't fully agree. Then I'm happy for you, truly. She glanced at Ronan, who'd tactfully turned to speak with Carol. He seems intense. He is. I managed a small smile, but he's honest, and right now that's worth more than romance. Celeste squeezed my hands one more time, then stepped back to Carol's side. They looked perfect together, mates in truth, in love, in destiny. And I stood beside a king I'd met 3 hours ago, preparing to become queen of a kingdom I'd never seen. The musicians struck up a new song, something joyful and fast-paced. Couples flooded the dance floor, the party resuming its celebration now that the shock of the announcement had faded into excited gossip. We should dance, Ronan said. It's expected. I'm not very good at dancing, neither am I. He offered his hand again, a wry smile tugging at his lips. We'll suffer through it together. I let him lead me onto the floor, hyper-aware of every eye tracking our movement. His hand settled on my waist, mine on his shoulder, the traditional position for a formal waltz. Relax, he murmured as we began to move. You're holding yourself like you're about to be attacked. I feel like I am. I tried to follow his lead, stumbled slightly. Everyone's watching. Let them. He guided me through a turn with surprising grace. By tomorrow, this will be old news. By next week, they'll have moved on to newer scandals. And by next month, you'll be queen, and they'll all be bowing. The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified me. We danced in silence for several measures, him leading with efficient competence, me trying not to step on his feet. Around us, other couples spun and laughed, lost in their own joy. Raina, Ronan said quietly, I want you to understand something. I looked up at him at those winter gold eyes. I meant what I said earlier, about honesty, about respect. This arrangement, it's not traditional, and it won't be easy, but I will keep my promises to you. He paused. All of them. Something in his tone made my breath catch. Even the ones about autonomy, about letting me speak my mind, especially those. His hand tightened fractionally at my waist. I've had enough yes-men and sick of fans to last several lifetimes. What I need is someone who will tell me when I'm being an idiot. Despite everything, the shock, the fear, the strangeness of this entire day, I laughed, actually laughed. Then you've chosen correctly, Your Majesty. I have extensive experience calling out idiocy. His smile was real this time, reaching his eyes. Good. I look forward to it. The song ended. We stepped apart, maintaining proper distance. But something had shifted. Some invisible wall had developed a crack, letting in the smallest sliver of possibility. Maybe this wouldn't be completely terrible. Maybe we could build something functional from the ruins of our separate devastations. Maybe. Ray? I turned to find my younger cousin Mira, pushing through the crowd. Her face flushed with excitement. Is it true? You're really marrying the Alpha King? Yes. The words still felt surreal. That's incredible. When's the wedding? Where will you live? Will you come back to visit? The questions tumbled out faster than I could process. Ronan cleared his throat gently. Perhaps we should discuss details somewhere more private. Rhea, he was offering me an escape from the overwhelming attention, the probing questions, the weight of expectations I couldn't yet carry. I took it. Excuse me, Mara. I need to. We need to discuss arrangements. I let Ronan guide me toward a side door, away from the noise and eyes and suffocating celebration. We ended up in one of the smaller drawing rooms, a space usually reserved for private pack meetings. The noise from the reception faded to a dull roar behind thick oak doors. I sagged against a chair, suddenly exhausted. How long until we can leave? Eager to escape, you have no idea. He crossed to a side table, poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. Actually, I have a very clear idea. Court functions are exhausting, weddings especially. So, I accepted the water gratefully. When does this happen? The actual wedding? 3 weeks. He leaned against the table, studying me. My council will expect a full state ceremony. Tedious but necessary. Until then, you'll need to come to the capital, familiarize yourself with the palace, meet the key players. 3 weeks, 21 days to transform from disposable daughter to queen. That's not much time. No, but you're intelligent and adaptable. You'll manage. He paused. We'll leave tomorrow morning. Your father has already agreed to the timeline. Of course he has. Bitterness leaked into my voice. Raina. Ronan set down his glass. I want you to understand something else. Your father. He made a tactical decision. Yes, but I don't think he realized what he was offering me. You're far more valuable than he knows. Because I'm educated. Because you survived. He held my gaze. Most people in your position would have become bitter, cruel, self-destructive. But you learned languages and strategy. You studied. You made yourself indispensable in the ways you could. That takes a specific kind of strength. The recognition in his words cracked something inside me. Some wall I'd built to protect myself from hope. I wanted to be ready, I admitted quietly, for whatever came next. I just never imagined it would be this. Neither did I. Something flickered across his face, grief maybe or memory. But here we are. Here we are. I echoed outside. Music swelled another dance. Another celebration of love and mates and destiny. But in this quiet room, I stood across from a king who'd offered me truth instead of romance, respect instead of passion, and somehow that felt like more than I'd ever hoped for. We should return, Ronan said finally, before your absence is noted. Yes, but I didn't move. Ronan, yes. Thank you for not making me feel like a transaction, even though that's what this is. His expression softened just slightly. We're both transactions, Rhea. The difference is we're honest about it. He offered his arm, formal, proper, exactly what a king should do for his future queen. I took it, and together we walked back into the celebration, into the noise and eyes and future we'd chosen. Tomorrow everything would change. Tonight survive one more hour of being Celeste's shadow. But after tonight, I'd step into the light as someone new, someone who'd chosen herself, even if that choice looked like surrender to everyone else. Chapter 4. The Journey North. Dawn arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. I'd spent the night in my small room, the servants' quarters that had become my prison, packing the few belongings I'd be taking to the capital. It didn't take long. Books mostly. A few changes of clothes that weren't particularly nice. A wooden box containing my mother's letters from when I was a child, back when she still wrote me notes, telling me I was special, before special became a euphemism for defective. Celeste and Carol had left the reception early, disappearing into the honeymoon suite my mother had decorated with ridiculous amounts of rose petals and silk. I'd watched them go with a strange numbness relief that I no longer had to smile. Grief that twisted like a knife, and underneath it all, a growing sense of unreality. By this time tomorrow, I'd be in the royal palace. In 3 weeks I'd be queen, the girl who couldn't shift, the disposable daughter, somehow elevated to the highest position a female wolf could hold. It felt like a fever dream. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Raina, may I come in? Celeste's voice. Of course, it's open. She slipped inside, still wearing her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders, without the makeup and styling. She looked younger, more like the sister I'd grown up with. The one who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd shared secrets and dreams before the world taught us we were supposed to be competing. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, perching on the edge of my narrow bed. Kept thinking about you leaving. You're married now. You have Carol. You won't even notice I'm gone. Don't, her voice cracked. Don't pretend like you're replaceable. You're my twin ray. Half of me is leaving today. Guilt churned in my stomach. This wasn't her fault. Not really. She hadn't asked for the mate bond to snap to her instead of me. She hadn't created a world where shifting determined worth. I'm sorry, I said quietly. That was unfair. It was honest. She pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. A gesture from childhood. I need to know you're really okay with this, with marrying him. Because if you're not, if this is just you running away, what would I be running from? I interrupted. My loving family who values me, my comfortable room, my bright future as the twin who failed. Celeste flinched. We never made you feel like a failure, didn't you? I sat beside her, suddenly exhausted. Celeste, I love you. But you have no idea what it's like to watch everyone around you transform into something magnificent while you stay exactly the same. To see people's eyes slide past you, like your furniture. To know that your own parents discuss you in terms of what to do about Rhina instead of what does Rhina want. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I tried to help. I always tried. I know. And that almost made it worse, because your help just highlighted how much I needed it. I took her hand. But this marrying Ronan, this is me choosing something for myself. Maybe it's not a love match. Maybe it's strategic and cold, but it's mine. Do you understand? She was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he seems hard like stone. Maybe I need stone. Maybe I'm tired of people who are soft and kind, but ultimately don't choose me. She understood the reference. Carol, the mate who should have been mine, and her face crumpled. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I know. And I did. That was the tragedy of it. No one had been cruel or malicious. Fate had simply been indifferent, but you did hurt me, Celeste. And staying here watching you build a life with him would hurt me every single day for the rest of my life. This way I get to be something other than your shadow. You were never my shadow. Then why did everyone act like I was? She had no answer for that. We sat in silence, holding hands like we used to as children, feeling the invisible threads that connected us stretching thinner. Will you write? She finally asked. Let me know you're okay. Yes, I promise, and visit once you're settled if I can. Though I wondered if I'd ever want to come back to this place that had made me feel so small. Another knock, more forceful. Reyna, the king's carriage is ready. My father's voice, brisk and businesslike. This was it. The moment of departure. Celeste hugged me fiercely, desperately, like she could somehow hold me here through sheer force of will. I love you. No matter what happens, no matter where you are, you're my sister. Nothing changes that. Nothing changes that. I love you, too. I pulled back, wiped her tears with my thumb. Be happy, Celeste. You deserve it. So do you. I wasn't sure I believed that, but I nodded anyway. She left, and I was alone with my small bag of belongings and the overwhelming sensation that I was about to step off a cliff into empty air. You're adaptable, I reminded myself. You survived this. You'll survive what comes next. I picked up my bag and walked out of the room without looking back. The carriage waiting in the courtyard was less ostentatious than I'd expected. Black lacquered wood with silver fittings, elegant but not gaudy. 4 midnight black horses stamped impatiently, their breath creating clouds in the crisp morning air. My family had gathered to see me off. My father looking pleased with himself, my mother dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, various aunts and uncles and cousins forming a small crowd. The entire pack, it seemed, wanted to witness the departure of the girl who'd somehow caught a king. Ronan stood beside the carriage door, dressed in traveling clothes of deep gray and black. Without the ceremonial robes, he looked less intimidating, more human, though the authority radiating from him never diminished. His eyes found mine, and something in them gentled. Ready as I'll ever be. He took my bag, handed it to a servant who loaded it with practiced efficiency. Then he offered his hand to help me into the carriage. I paused at the threshold, turned back to my family. My father stepped forward. Rhea, you've brought great honor to this pack. I'm proud of you. Now he was proud. Not when I'd learned 6 languages. Not when I'd studied pack law until I could recite it backwards. Not when I'd survived 23 years of being told I was broken. Now when I was leaving, when I'd become valuable through marriage. Thank you, Father, I said, because what else could I say? My mother rushed forward, pulled me into a perfumed embrace. Write often. Take care of yourself. And Raina, she pulled back, held my face between her hands. Try to be happy, please. The plea in her voice surprised me. Maybe she did care in her own limited way. I will, I promised, though neither of us knew if I could keep it. Celeste and Carol had appeared at the edge of the crowd. She raised her hand in farewell, her face still blotchy from crying. Carol stood behind her, his expression unreadable. But when our eyes met, that phantom mate bond flickered one last time. Goodbye, it whispered. I'm sorry, goodbye, I nodded. Once acknowledgement, forgiveness, release, and climbed into the carriage. Ronan followed, settling onto the seat across from me. The door closed with a definitive click. A moment later, the carriage lurched into motion. I watched through the window as my family, my pack, my entire past life grew smaller and smaller until the estate disappeared around a bend in the road, and there was nothing but forest and future. All right, Ronan asked quietly. I turned away from the window. Ask me in 3 weeks. A slight smile tugged at his lips. Fair enough. The carriage's interior was comfortable. Velvet cushions, small lanterns that swayed gently with the movement, a warm blanket folded in the corner. Across from me, Ronan produced a leather-bound book from somewhere and began reading, apparently content with silence. I appreciated that. After the emotional intensity of the morning, the wedding, the announcement, I needed quiet to process everything. We traveled for perhaps an hour before curiosity overcame my exhaustion. How long is the journey? He looked up from his book. 3 days by carriage 2 if we pushed, but there's no need to make you uncomfortable. 3 days trapped in a confined space with a man I barely knew. 3 days to figure out how to navigate this strange new dynamic. Tell me about the palace, I said. What should I expect? He sat down the book, giving me his full attention. It's large, overwhelming, probably the first time you see it, built into the mountain itself, with sections dating back 1,000 years. The public areas are grand, meant to intimidate visiting dignitaries. Your private quarters will be in the royal wing, separate from mine but connected by a shared study. Separate. I was surprised. I thought I told you I'd give you your own space. I meant it. His gold eyes were steady. Well, share public areas when necessary, but your rooms are yours. Lock the doors if you want. I won't enter without invitation. The relief was immediate and startling. Thank you. Don't thank me for basic respect. He leaned back, studying me. The palace staff will be curious. Some will be welcoming. Others wary. You're young. You can't shift. And you're marrying a king who's been notoriously solitary since his mate died. They won't know what to make of you. There, should I be worried? No. Wary, perhaps. The head housekeeper, Margaret, is loyal and efficient. I've already instructed her to help you acclimate. But the court, that's more complicated. How complicated? He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. The council believes I chose you because you're controllable. Weak. They think this is a political marriage where I'll maintain all the power and you'll be decorative. Anger sparked. And what do you think? I think they're fools, he said it matter-of-factly. But their foolishness works in our favor. Let them underestimate you. Learn the palace, learn the players, learn the politics. Then when you're ready, show them exactly how wrong they were. It was tactical advice. But it was also something else. Permission to be strategic, to use my intelligence as a weapon. You want me to spy for you? I want you to understand what you're walking into. The court is full of people who smile while calculating how to use you. Some will try to befriend you, to get closer to me. Others will try to undermine you to diminish my authority. You need to be able to tell the difference and trust no one. Trust yourself. Trust in me eventually if I earn it everyone else. He shrugged. Proceed with caution. It should have been paranoid. This worldview instead it felt realistic. Honest in a way most people weren't. What about your council? I asked. Will they try to prevent the marriage? They wouldn't dare. I'm still the Alpha King. My word is law. But they'll make their displeasure known through smaller acts of resistance, delayed responses to your requests, subtle disrespect, testing boundaries to see what you'll tolerate. And what should I tolerate? His smile was sharp. Nothing. You're going to be their queen. Command them accordingly. The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Me commanding ancient counselors who'd served kings for decades. Me wielding authority I'd never imagined possessing. I don't know how to do that. I admitted how to command, how to be queenly. You'll learn. And Reyna, he leaned forward slightly. You have something most royals lack. You've lived without power. You know what it's like to be dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. That gives you perspective. Use it. The carriage hit a rough patch of road, jostling us. Outside, the forest had grown denser. Older trees with thick canopies that filtered the morning light into green-gold shadows. Can I ask you something? I said. About your mate, your late mate. His expression shuddered, but he nodded. Yes, did you love her? I mean, I know you said you did, but was it the mate bond or something more? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer then both. The bond was instant. Yes, that soul-deep recognition you felt with Carol. But love, he looked out the window that grew over time. Julie was patient with me, gentle when I was hard, hopeful when I was cynical. She believed I could be better than I was. And somehow around her I tried to be. The past tense. The grief buried under carefully controlled words. It was devastatingly human. I'm sorry, I said softly, for your loss, for what you went through. It was 3 years ago. I've learned to function around the absence. He met my eyes again. But that's why I can't do this again. Rhea can't let someone in that way. The bond makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability is dangerous for a king. When Julie died, I nearly abdicated. Nearly walked away from everything, because the pain was too much to bear and still lead. But you didn't walk away. No, because that would have dishonored her sacrifice. She died trying to give me an heir, trying to secure my throne. The least I could do was keep it. His jaw tightened, so I built walls, made myself stone. As your sister said, it's the only way I know to survive. Understanding settled over me. We were both survivors, both people who'd learned to function despite devastating loss. His walls and my adaptability, different armor for the same wound. I won't try to break down your walls, I said. If that's what you're worried about. I'm not worried. I'm being clear about what this is. He paused. But Reyna, if you need to talk, if you need anything, I may not be able to give you romantic love, but I can give you honesty, partnership, respect. That has to be enough. It is enough. And strangely, I meant it. I spent my whole life waiting for someone to choose me because of the mate bond. Maybe it's better this way, chosen for my mind instead of fate's caprice. Perhaps he picked up his book again. We'll find out. We stopped for lunch at a small inn, a rustic place that served simple food and asked no questions. Ronan had arranged for a private room, sparing us the curious stares, and whispered gossip that would have erupted if people realized the Alpha King was traveling with his future queen. I picked at bread and cheese, my appetite minimal. Across the table, Ronan ate with efficient focus. Clearly used to taking fuel where he could get it. You need to eat, he observed. It's a long journey, and you barely touched breakfast. I'm not hungry, nerves mostly. I tore off a piece of bread, forced myself to chew. Everything's happening so fast. Yesterday morning, I was pinning my sister's wedding dress. Now I'm here with you traveling to become queen. It doesn't feel real. It rarely does. The first time I wore the crown after my father's death, I kept waiting for someone to tell me it was a mistake, that I was too young, too unprepared. He sipped his water. No one did. Of course, they just expected me to know what to do. Did you? Not even slightly. I made mistakes. Still do. His expression turned wry. Kingship isn't something you master. It's something you survive while trying not to cause too much damage. The admission was surprisingly vulnerable. You're trying to make me feel better. I'm trying to be honest. You asked for that. Remember? I did. I managed another bite of bread. It's strange, though. You barely know me, and yet you're sharing things that feel personal. You're going to be my wife, my queen. If we can't be honest with each other, this arrangement becomes another game of politics and pretense. I have enough of that with everyone else. He was right. And if this was going to work, if we were going to build something functional from this strange foundation, we needed to start with truth. Then can I ask something else? I said something that might be uncomfortable always. Why haven't you taken another mate, someone the bond could snap to? It's been 3 years. Surely the moon goddess would offer you another chance. His expression hardened because I don't want another chance. The bond is supposed to be sacred, once in a lifetime. When Julie died, I begged the moon goddess to let me die, too, to follow her wherever she'd gone. Instead, I woke up every morning with the bond's absence like a missing limb. He set down his cup with controlled force. If the goddess offered me another bond, I'd refuse it. I won't survive loving and losing again. I can't. The raw pain in his words made my chest ache. So, you chose me. Because you knew there'd be no bond, no risk of that kind of loss. Yes. No apology, no softening. I chose you because you're intelligent and capable. Yes. But also because the moon goddess would never bond us. You can't shift, and I'm finished with that particular gift. We're safe from each other. Arena, we can build something practical without the risk of devastation. It should have hurt being chosen specifically because he'd never love me. Instead, it felt like clarity, like understanding the rules of a game before playing it. Safe from each other, I repeated quietly. I suppose there are worse foundations for a marriage. Much worse, he stood, offering his hand. Come, we should keep moving if we want to reach the way station before dark. I took his hand. This was becoming habit, this gesture of formal courtesy, and let him guide me back to the carriage. As we settled in for the afternoon's travel, I found myself studying him. This king who'd loved deeply and lost catastrophically, who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to be vulnerable, who'd chosen me precisely because I was safe. No mate bond, no risk, no threat to the careful control he'd constructed. We were both broken in our own ways, but maybe broken things could still be useful. Maybe we could build something functional from our collective damage. Outside the carriage window, the landscape shifted fewer farms, more wilderness, the forest growing darker and older as we traveled north toward the mountains, toward the palace, toward whatever future we'd create together. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine it, me as queen, commanding councils, navigating politics, standing beside a king who'd promised me respect but not love. It should have terrified me. Instead, for the first time in months, I felt something almost like hope. We reached the way station just as twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and gold. It was a fortified inn designed for high-ranking travelers with guards and private suites, and the kind of security that discouraged questions. Ronan had arranged for adjoining rooms, separate spaces connected by a shared sitting area, true to his word about giving me privacy, about honoring boundaries. A servant had already unpacked my meager belongings. My few dresses hung in a massive wardrobe, looking lost. My book sat on a bedside table next to fresh flowers someone had arranged. It was the nicest room I'd ever slept in, and I felt like an imposter. A knock at the connecting door. "Raina, may I come in?" "Yes." Ronan entered, changed from traveling clothes into something more casual, a simple shirt and trousers that made him look younger, less intimidating. He carried 2 glasses of wine. "You look overwhelmed." he observed, offering me a glass. Your powers of observation are astounding, I said dryly, then winced. Sorry, that was honest, he smiled. Good. I meant what I said about wanting you to speak your mind. I accepted the wine, sank into a plush chair by the window. Outside, stars were beginning to appear, brighter here than in the packlands I'd left behind. Ronan settled into the opposite chair, comfortable with the silence. We sat like that for several minutes. Two strangers who'd agreed to marry, sipping wine and watching darkness claim the world. Tomorrow night, we'll reach the palace, he finally said. There will be a formal reception. Nothing as elaborate as your sister's wedding, but still public. The council will want to meet you, assess you. It will be difficult. I assumed it would be. I'll be there the entire time. If anyone crosses a line, if you need extraction, just say the word and I'll end it. The protective offer surprised me. Why? Because you're mine now. He said it simply as a fact. Not in a possessive way, but in a responsibility way. You agreed to this arrangement, and that means I protect you from the wolves, metaphorical and literal. You're mine now. The words settled over me like a cloak, heavy, but not unwelcome. Thank you, I said softly. That means more than you know. We lapsed back into silence, but it felt different now. Companionable. Almost like we were beginning to find a rhythm, an understanding of how to exist in each other's space. Eventually, exhaustion pulled at me. I set down my empty glass. I should sleep. Long day tomorrow, yes. He stood, moved toward the connecting door, then paused. Rhea, you did well today. Leaving your family, facing this journey, I know it wasn't easy. Neither was proposing to a stranger and making her your queen. His smile was brief but genuine. No, it wasn't. But I think we'll manage. Why? Because we're both survivors. And survivors find a way. He closed the door between our rooms, leaving me alone with the too large wardrobe, the too nice flowers, and the strange, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd made the right choice. I changed into a nightgown, climbed into the massive bed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I'd meet the court. Tomorrow, I'd begin transforming into whatever a queen was supposed to be. But tonight, I was just Raina, the girl who couldn't shift, who'd watched her twin marry her mate, who'd chosen stone over softness and strategy over love, and somehow, impossibly, that felt like enough. Chapter 5. The Palace of Wolves. The palace revealed itself gradually, like a secret the mountains had been keeping. We'd been climbing steadily since dawn, the forest thinning as elevation increased, replaced by stark granite cliffs and patches of stubborn snow that defied the autumn season. Then, as we rounded a final switchback, the carriage slowed, and Ronan gestured toward the window. Look, I pressed my face to the glass and forgot how to breathe. The palace wasn't built into the mountain. It was the mountain. Massive towers carved from living stone rose toward the sky. Their surfaces etched with patterns that might have been decorative, or might have been ancient runes. Bridges arched between peaks, impossibly delicate spans of stone that shouldn't exist but did. Windows glittered like dark eyes watching our approach, and everywhere carved into archways embedded in walls, crowning turrets were wolves, stone wolves in every pose imaginable. Hunting, howling, sleeping, fighting. A monument to shifter power built to remind everyone who looked upon it exactly who ruled here. I struggled for words. Terrifying, yes. Ronan's voice held grim satisfaction. It's supposed to be. As we drew closer, I could make out more details. Guards stationed along the walls, their armor catching sunlight. Banners bearing the royal crest. A silver wolf against a black field. And people, dozens of them, gathered at the main gates like they'd been waiting. My stomach dropped. Is that the reception you mentioned? No, that's tonight. This is just the staff. Curious to see their new queen. He studied my expression. You don't have to smile or wave. You can be yourself. And if myself is terrified, then you're honest. He leaned forward slightly. Rhea, listen to me. These people have seen kings and queens come and go for centuries. They've witnessed power struggles, assassinations, madness, and brilliance. They don't expect perfection. They expect strength, and you've already proven you have that by agreeing to marry you, by surviving everything that led you here. The carriage passed through the gates, massive iron things that groaned as they swung open, and into a courtyard so vast it could have held my entire Pax estate 3 times over. The assembled crowd parted like water, creating a path to the main entrance, where an elderly woman in severe black clothing waited, her spine straight as a sword. The carriage stopped. Ronan exited first, then offered his hand. I took it and stepped into my new life. The crowd's reaction was immediate. A collective inhale followed by whispers that spread like wildfire. I caught fragments. So young can't even shift. Did you hear? Pretty enough, I suppose. King's lost his mind. Ronan's hand tightened on mine. A brief pressure of warning or support. I couldn't tell which. Then he raised his voice, and it carried across the courtyard with absolute authority. This is Reyna Gates, my betrothed. In 3 weeks, she will be your queen. You will treat her with the respect that position demands. Or you will answer to me personally. Am I understood? Silence crashed over the courtyard. Every head bowed in unison. Not warmth, not welcome, but obedience born from fear. It would have to be enough. The elderly woman approached, her movements crisp, despite what must have been significant age. Up close, her face was a map of wrinkles, each line suggesting a story I'd never know, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and assessing. Your Majesty, she curtsied to Ronan with practiced efficiency, then turned that sharp gaze on me. Miss Gates, I'm Margaret, head of the household staff. Welcome to Stonehaven Palace. Thank you. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I've prepared the Queen's suite as instructed. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your quarters so you can rest before tonight's reception. She glanced at Ronan. Your Majesty, the Council has requested an immediate audience. Something about the northern border disputes. Ronan's jaw tightened. Of course they have. He turned to me. Go with Margaret. Settle in. I'll find you before the reception to brief you on who's who. He was leaving me already. I'd known this would happen. Known we'd have separate responsibilities. But the reality of facing this massive, intimidating palace alone made my chest constrict. As if sensing my panic, he leaned closer and lowered his voice. You survived your family. You'll survive this. And Reyna, Margaret is trustworthy. Listen to her. Then he was striding away, his presence commanding attention even in departure, leaving me with the severe housekeeper and several hundred curious eyes. Margaret gestured toward the main entrance. This way. Miss Gates, I followed, hyper-aware of the stairs tracking my movement, the whispers resuming the moment we were out of Ronan's intimidating range. The palace's interior matched its exterior, ancient, imposing, and designed to make visitors feel small. We passed through corridors wide enough to drive a carriage through, past tapestries depicting legendary battles and legendary wolves. Servants flattened themselves against walls as we passed, their eyes downcast but their curiosity palpable. Margaret maintained a brisk pace, her voice crisp as she delivered what was clearly a prepared speech. The palace has 4 main wings. East Wing houses the staff quarters and kitchens. West Wing contains guest suites and the lesser council chambers. South Wing is public throne room, great hall, reception spaces. North Wing is private, the royal family's personal quarters. We climbed a spiral staircase carved from the mountain itself, each step worn smooth by centuries of feet. The King's suite is at the far end of the North Wing, Margaret continued. The Queen's suite connects to it through a shared study, as His Majesty requested. You'll have complete privacy, your own bedroom, bathing chamber, sitting room, and a small library I've stocked with texts on palace protocol and pack history. Thank you, I managed. That's very thoughtful. It's practical. She glanced back at me, and something in her severe expression softened fractionally. You'll need to learn quickly, Miss Gates. The court won't make allowances for ignorance, no matter how new you are. We reached the top of the stairs and entered a corridor lined with portraits. Former kings and queens, their painted eyes following our progress. At the end, massive oak doors carved with running wolves stood slightly ajar. Margaret pushed them open. The Queen's suite. I stepped inside and lost my breath for the second time that day. Calling it a suite was like calling the ocean damp. The sitting room alone was larger than my entire bedroom back home. With floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over mountain peaks and valleys I couldn't name. Furniture in deep blues and silvers created intimate conversation areas. Bookshelves lined one wall, already filled with precisely the texts Margaret had mentioned. And everywhere in the subtle patterns of the upholstery, the carved details of the furniture. The metal work of the candelabras were wolves. The bedroom is through there. Margaret pointed to another set of doors. Bathing chamber beyond that. The study you'll share with His Majesty is that door. It's unlocked from both sides, but there's a privacy bolt you can engage if needed. I walked to the windows, pressed my palm against the cold glass. From this height, the valley below looked like a painted miniature forests and rivers, and distant pack territories that were now theoretically under my authority. "How long have you worked here?" I asked without turning. 53 years. I came as a young maid, worked my way up. Margaret's reflection appeared in the window beside mine. I've served 4 kings, 3 queens, and witnessed more palace intrigue than I care to remember. And what do you think of me? The question escaped before I could stop it. Honestly, Margaret was quiet for a moment. I think you're terrified, out of your depth, and trying very hard not to show it. I think the king chose you for reasons the council doesn't understand, and you probably don't understand either. And I think she paused. I think if you're smart and careful, you might survive. That's not particularly encouraging. I'm not paid to be encouraging, Miss Gates. I'm paid to run this household efficiently. She moved toward the door. The reception begins at 8. I'll send attendants at 7 to help you dress. His Majesty has already selected appropriate clothing. It's in the wardrobe. Wait. I turned to face her. Can I ask you something? You can ask. I may not answer. The king's late mate, Julie. What was she like? Margaret's severe expression flickered something that might have been grief. Carefully controlled, she was kind, gentle, everything this palace isn't. She softened His Majesty, made him laugh, reminded him that there was more to life than duty and war. Her voice hardened, and the pregnancy killed her slowly, painfully, while he watched helplessly. It destroyed something in him. He hasn't been the same since. The words painted a picture of a love so deep that its loss had been cataclysmic. No wonder Ronan had built walls. No wonder he'd chosen me specifically because I was safe. I'm not here to replace her, I said quietly. I know I can't. Good, because the court will compare you to her constantly. They'll find you wanting your younger. You can't shift. You're an unknown. Margaret's gaze sharpened. But you have something she didn't. What? You've already survived being underestimated. Use that. She left before I could respond, the door closing with a definitive click. I stood in the too large sitting room, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined, and felt the weight of expectations settling over me, like chains made of silk and silver. You survived being underestimated. Use that. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe my weakness could be a weapon if I wielded it correctly. I walked to the bookshelf, pulled down a volume titled A Complete History of the Royal Court. If I was going to face these people tonight, I needed to understand who they were, what they wanted, and how to navigate their expectations. I had 4 hours until the reception. Time to stop being renegades, the disposable daughter, and start becoming whoever the queen needed to be. At precisely 7, 3 attendants arrived, 2 young women and a man, all moving with the efficient coordination of people who'd done this many times before. They descended on me with professional detachment, transforming me from travel-worn and overwhelmed into something resembling royalty. The bath they'd drawn was almost uncomfortably hot, scented with oils I couldn't name. They washed my hair with careful thoroughness, then spent what felt like hours arranging it into an elaborate updo that exposed my neck and made me look older, more regal. The dress Ronan had selected sat waiting on the bed, deep midnight blue that reminded me of the sky just after sunset, with silver embroidery that caught the light like starlight. It fit perfectly, which shouldn't have surprised me. Kings had resources for such things. The neckline was modest but elegant, the sleeves long and fitted, the skirt falling in layers of silk that whispered when I moved. They added jewelry. A simple silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Matching earrings that felt strange and heavy in my ears. When they finally stepped back, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She looked like someone who belonged here. Someone who could command a room, navigate politics, stand beside a king without flinching. She looked like a lie I was about to tell with my entire body. "You look beautiful, Miss Gates," one of the attendants said softly. "The court won't know what hit them." I hoped she was right. A knock at the door, authoritative, familiar. Ronan's voice came through. "Raina." "May I enter?" Yes. He stepped inside and I watched his expression shift. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. He'd changed into formal court attire, black and silver that echoed my dress. His hair pulled back to reveal the sharp angles of his face, a circlet of silver resting on his brow that proclaimed him king without needing words. We looked like a matched set, intentional, strategic, and completely false. "You look," he paused, searching for words. "Appropriate." That's possibly the least romantic compliment I've ever received. His lips twitched. "I'm trying to be honest. You look like a queen, Raina. That's what matters tonight." The attendants had melted away, leaving us alone. Ronan circled me slowly, assessing with the same careful attention he'd used when we first met. "The council will be watching for weakness," he said. "Signs that you're overwhelmed, uncertain, malleable. Don't give them anything. So, no crying, fainting, or running away screaming." "Got it. I'm serious." He stopped in front of me. "These people are predators. They'll test you. Push boundaries. Try to determine exactly how much disrespect they can show before I intervene. You need to establish dominance immediately. I'm not an alpha. I can't even shift. How am I supposed to establish dominance? With your mind, with words?" He held my gaze. "You're educated, intelligent, and observant. Use those weapons. When someone tries to belittle you, respond with such perfect courtesy that it becomes an insult. When they question your authority, cite pack law they've forgotten. Make them realize that underestimating you is a mistake." It was the same advice Margaret had given, phrased differently. Use being underestimated as a weapon. What if I fail? The question came out smaller than I intended. "You won't." He said it with absolute certainty. "Because failing would mean going back to your father's pack, to watching your sister live the life you should have had, to being nothing again, and you'd rather walk through fire than accept that." He was right. The thought of returning in disgrace, of admitting I couldn't handle this, was worse than any fear the court could inspire. "Tell me who to watch for," I said. "Who are the real threats?" Ronan moved to a small desk, pulled out a sheet of parchment with names and brief descriptions written in neat script. "I had this prepared for you. The key players," I scanned the list. 12 names, each with titles and brief notations. Lord Hadrian, head of council. Ambitious, believes king should marry alpha bloodline. Lady Seraphine, council member, wealthy, influential in southern territories. Commander Thni, head of royal guard, loyal but traditional. Lord Voss, council member, young, dangerous, thinks I'm weak, and more a rogues gallery of people who would judge me, test me, potentially try to destroy me if I showed vulnerability. Lord Voss is the one to watch most carefully. Ronan said, He's been pushing for me to remarry someone from his family. Your existence ruins those plans. He'll try to undermine you subtly, make you seem foolish or incompetent. How do I handle him with absolute confidence? If he asks you a question designed to make you look ignorant, turn it back on him. If he insults you indirectly, make sure your response leaves no doubt you understood the insult and chose to rise above it. Ronan's expression hardened. And if he crosses a line, I'll destroy him. But it's better if you handle it yourself first. I folded the parchment, tucked it into the hidden pocket the attendants had shown me in the dress. Anything else I should know? Yes. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. After tonight, rumors will spread about us, about our relationship, about why I chose you. Let them spread. Trying to control gossip is futile. Just make sure your actions don't give them ammunition. What kind of actions? Anything that suggests we're not a united front. If I make a decision, support it publicly. Even if you disagree, if you need to argue with me, do it in private. The court will exploit any crack they perceive in our alliance. It made sense. Brutal practical sense. This wasn't a marriage. It was a strategic partnership that required absolute coordination. I understand. He studied me for a long moment. You're trembling. I looked down at my hands. He was right. They were shaking slightly. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let them see it. He offered his arm. Ready? No. I was absolutely not ready, but I took his arm anyway. Felt the solid warmth of him through the formal fabric as I'll ever be. We walked through the connecting study, a space I'd explore later, filled with books and papers, and the organized chaos of someone who actually worked, rather than simply ruled, and into the corridor beyond. The sounds of the reception reached us before we arrived. Music, laughter, the low murmur of dozens of conversations happening simultaneously. 2 guards stood at the entrance to the great hall, their expressions neutral, but their eyes assessing. Ronan nodded to them. The doors swung open and we stepped into a room that fell silent. The moment we appeared, the great hall was everything. I'd feared massive and intimidating with vated ceilings that seemed to stretch into shadow. Walls lined with weapons and ancient wolf pelts and what had to be 300 people arranged in a careful hierarchy I couldn't yet read. Every eye turned toward us. Every face showed calculation behind whatever expression they'd chosen to wear. At the far end of the room, on a raised D, sat 2 thrones, one occupied by an invisible weight, the absent queen, the other waiting for the king to claim it, for us to claim them. Ronan's hand covered mine on his arm. Brief pressure, grounding. Then he raised his voice, letting it carry to every corner. Lords and ladies of the court, honored guests, members of the council, allow me to present Reyna Gates, my betrothed. In 3 weeks, she will be crowned your queen. I expect you to welcome her as such. The court erupted in applause, polite, measured, completely devoid of genuine warmth. But they bowed, a rolling wave of obeisance that rippled through the crowd. I kept my spine straight, my expression neutral, my fear locked away where no one could see it. You survived being underestimated. Use that. Ronan led me into the crowd and the games began. Chapter 6, The Test of Wolves. The first person to approach was Lord Hadrian, the head of council. According to Ronan's list, he was older, perhaps 60, with silver threaded through dark hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades wielding authority. His smile was political perfection, warm enough to seem genuine, calculated enough to mean nothing. Your Majesty, he bowed to Ronan, then turned that assessing gaze on me. Miss Gates, what an unexpected honor to meet you. Unexpected. The word carried layers of meaning. Surprise, skepticism, barely veiled disapproval, Lord Hadrian. I kept my voice steady, polite. The honor is mine. His Majesty speaks highly of your council, does he? Hurrian's eyebrows rose fractionally. How generous. And tell me, Miss Gates, what do you know of governing? Of the complexities involved in ruling multiple packs. There it was, the first test. He was questioning my qualifications, my intelligence, my right to stand here. I felt Ronan tense beside me, ready to intervene. I touched his arm lightly. I've got this. I know enough to recognize that governing requires understanding pack law, territorial disputes, resource management, and the delicate balance of power between tradition and progress. I said smoothly. I've studied pack history extensively, including the reform Act's Your Own Grandfather, implemented 3 generations ago. Brilliant work on consolidating border territories, though the taxation structure proved contentious until the amendments of 1847. Hadrian's expression flickered surprise that I'd done my homework and done it thoroughly. I also know, I continued, that the best rulers surround themselves with knowledgeable advisors and actually listen to their counsel. I look forward to learning from your experience, Lord Hadrian. It was perfect courtesy wrapped around a subtle reminder. I might be young and new, but I wasn't ignorant, and I was smart enough to acknowledge his expertise while establishing I wouldn't be pushed around. Hadrian's smile shifted into something more genuine. Indeed. Perhaps this will be an interesting partnership after all. He bowed again, slightly deeper this time, and moved away. Ronan's hand found the small of my back, a brief touch of approval. Well done. 1 down, I murmured. How many more? Too many to count. He was right. They came in waves, lords and ladies. Council members and pack representatives, each with their own agenda, their own tests disguised as pleasantries. Lady Seraphine, elegant and vicious in equal measure, asked pointed questions about my family's modest standings. I deflected with observations about how true strength came from character rather than bloodline, which she couldn't argue without insulting herself. Commander Thani, the head of the Royal Guard, was more direct. Can you defend yourself, Miss Gates? Queens face dangers beyond politics. I've trained in hand-to-hand combat since I was 12, I replied, which was true. Unable to shift, I'd learned other ways to protect myself. I may not have claws, Commander, but I have a knife and the knowledge to use it. Would you like a demonstration? His stern expression cracked into something almost like respect. Perhaps another time, Miss Gates. Between introductions, Ronan kept me close, his presence a constant anchor. He'd guide me toward allies, with subtle pressure on my elbow, steer me away from known troublemakers with a gentle hand at my back. It was like dancing a careful choreography where he led, and I tried desperately not to stumble. You're doing better than I expected, he murmured, during a brief moment of prosody near the refreshment table. High praise. I'm serious. The court expected someone timid, easily flustered. You're holding your own. I took a sip of wine I didn't want, using it to hide my shaking hands. I'm terrified. I know, but you're not showing it, which is what matters. He scanned the crowd. Lord Voss is watching us. He's been circling like a shark for the past 20 minutes. Be ready. My stomach tightened. Voss was the one Ronan had specifically warned me about. Young, dangerous, ambitious. I searched the crowd until I found him. Mid-30s, handsome in a sharp-edged way, with eyes that promised cruelty wrapped in charm. He was making his way toward us, deliberately slow, letting the anticipation build. Your Majesty Boss's bow was technically correct, but somehow mocking. Miss Gates, you look lovely this evening. Blue suits you. Though I confess, I expected something more traditional for such an important occasion. The insult was subtle, suggesting I didn't know proper court dress, that I was unsuitable for the role. How kind of you to notice, Lord Voss. I smiled sweetly. I chose blue specifically because it's the color of wisdom and calm qualities I imagine will serve me well in court. What does your choice of red represent? Aggression or merely a bold-fashioned statement? Voss's smile tightened. Around us, several people turned to listen, sensing blood in the water. Sharp tongue, Miss Gates. One might think you're trying to compensate for other deficiencies. There it was, the real attack. Other deficiencies. He meant my inability to shift the fundamental flaw that made me unworthy in the eyes of traditionalists. Ronan's hand moved to my waist. Protective, but I stepped forward slightly, claiming this fight as my own. If you're referring to my inability to shift, Lord Voss, please be direct. I've never found value in cowardly implications masquerading as politeness. I kept my voice level, even pleasant. Yes, as I cannot shift. Yes, that makes me unusual, but it also means I've spent my entire life developing skills that shifters often neglect. Diplomacy, strategy, scholarly pursuits. I may not have claws, but I have a mind. I suspect that's what His Majesty values. Is it? Voss turned his attention to Ronan, his tone provocative. Your Majesty, the court wonders, and forgive my boldness. But what does a king gain from marrying someone who cannot shift? Someone who cannot provide the traditional strengths Aluna offers. Surely there were more suitable candidates. The crowd had gone silent now, everyone watching this confrontation unfold. Voss was forcing Ronan to publicly defend his choice, to explain why he'd chosen me over Alpha-born shifters. Ronan's expression went cold. The temperature in the immediate area seemed to drop. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. Lord Voss, I'll explain this once simply, so even you can understand. He stepped forward, making Voss reflexively step back. I am your king. My choices are not subject to your approval or understanding. I chose Raina because she possesses qualities I require in a queen: intelligence, courage, and the ability to think strategically rather than rely on brute strength. He paused, letting that sink in. But since you seem genuinely curious about what I gain from this union, let me be explicit. I gain a partner who understands what it means to be underestimated and uses that as an advantage. I gain someone who studied pack law while others were getting drunk at pack runs. I gain a queen who will rule with her mind rather than her ability to intimidate through shifting. Ronan's gold eyes bore into Voss. Now, do you have any other questions about my judgment? Or shall we discuss your recent failures in managing the eastern border disputes? Failures that suggest perhaps you're the one compensating for deficiencies. The crowd collectively inhaled. Voss's face went white, then flushed with humiliation. Around us, people suddenly found their drinks fascinating, unwilling to meet his eyes. No, Your Majesty, Voss managed through clenched teeth. No further questions. Good. Then I suggest you spend less time questioning your king and more time doing your actual job. Ronan dismissed him with a look, then turned to me, his expression softening fractionally. Come, I want to introduce you to the Southern Pack representatives. He guided me away, leaving Voss standing alone in the middle of the crowd, publicly humiliated. That was brutal, I murmured once we were out of earshot. He deserved it, and now everyone knows what happens when they question my choice. His hand remained at my back, steady and warm. How are you holding up? I need air, and possibly several glasses of wine. Soon, 2 more critical introductions. Then I'll extract us. True to his word, he made quick work of the remaining necessary conversations, introducing me to allies who seemed genuinely welcoming, or at least professionally neutral. Throughout it all, I smiled, remembered names, asked appropriate questions, and slowly felt my face freeze into a mask of politeness that had nothing to do with what I actually felt. Finally, mercifully, Ronan caught Margaret's eye across the room. She nodded and began efficiently herding people toward the dining areas. A subtle signal that the formal reception portion was ending, transitioning into dinner that we apparently weren't required to attend. Let's go, Ronan said quietly. We slipped out through a side door, escaping into a corridor that felt blessedly empty and quiet. The moment the door closed behind us, cutting off the noise of the reception, I sagged against the wall. I can't believe I survived that. Not only survived, you excelled. He leaned against the opposite wall, studying me. Hadrian was impressed. Several council members I spoke with afterward mentioned, your intelligence, Even Voss's humiliation works in our favor. Shows you have my protection. I shouldn't need your protection. I should be able to handle this myself. You did handle it yourself. I only intervened when he directly challenged my authority, not yours. Ronan's expression was serious. Reyna, you stood in a room full of predators who wanted you to fail, and you held your own. That's not nothing. The validation settled something inside me. Some frantic voice that had been screaming I wasn't enough, would never be enough. Thank you, I said softly, for defending me, for giving me the chance to defend myself first. That's what partners do. Partners, not lovers, not mates. Partners. It should have felt cold. But somehow it felt solid, real. We stood in the quiet corridor, both of us exhausted from the performance we'd just given. Through the walls, muffled sounds of the reception continuing without us, laughter and music, and political maneuvering that would extend late into the night. I should show you something, Ronan said abruptly. Before you're too tired, it's important. What? Come with me. He led me deeper into the palace, away from the public areas, through corridors that grew progressively older, more primitive. The stone here was rougher, the carvings more ancient, the air colder. We passed no servants, no guards, just empty passages that felt forgotten by time. Finally, we reached a heavy wooden door bound in iron. Ronan produced a key, unlocked it, and gestured for me to enter. The room beyond was circular, carved directly from mountain stone, with a single window opening onto star-filled sky. And covering every inch of wall space were records, scrolls, books, tablets, documents that looked centuries old. What is this place? I breathed. The Royal Archive. The complete history of the monarchy going back to the first king. Ronan moved to one of the shelves, ran his fingers along ancient spines. Every treaty, every law, every secret the royal family has kept for 1,000 years. It's accessible only to the reigning monarch and their chosen consort. He pulled down a leather-bound volume, handed it to me. This is the record of mates and marriages. You'll find something interesting. I opened it carefully, scanning pages of elegant script documenting royal pairings, names, dates, whether unions were based on mate bonds or political necessity. And as I read, a pattern emerged. Most of these aren't mate bonds, I said slowly. No, 70% are political marriages, strategic alliances. The mate bond is rare enough that most kings never find their true mate. Or if they do, politics prevents the match. He took the book back, returned it to its place. The council likes to pretend that royal marriages should all be blessed by the moon goddess, that only mate bonds are legitimate, but history tells a different story. Why show me this? Because you need to understand what we're doing isn't abnormal. It's actually closer to tradition than they'd ever admit. They want you to feel illegitimate, like you don't belong here. But this archive proves otherwise. His gold eyes were steady on mine. You have every right to be Queen Reyna. The moon goddess's blessing isn't required. No matter what they say, the weight of that, the validation of history itself made my throat tight. Thank you. I managed for showing me this for all of it. You're welcome. He moved toward the door. Come, you need rest. Tomorrow starts early meetings with household staff. More introductions, and you'll need to begin working with the palace seamstresses on your coronation gown. Right. The coronation. In 3 weeks, I'd officially become queen. The thought was still surreal. We walked back through the ancient corridors in comfortable silence. When we reached the connecting study between our suites, Ronan paused. You really did well tonight, Reyna. I meant that. So did you. Destroying Lord Voss was particularly impressive. His smile was brief. He'll recover and plot revenge, probably. But that's a problem for another day. He hesitated, and something crossed his face, an expression I couldn't quite read. Sleep well, you two. I watched him disappear into his own suite, then entered mine. The attendants had already been through the bed, turned down, candles lit, a tray of food left in case I was hungry. I wasn't. I was exhausted and overwhelmed, and strangely elated. I'd survived. More than survived, I'd held my own against people who'd wanted me to fail. I changed into a nightgown, washed my face, and climbed into the enormous bed. Through the window, stars blazed against black sky, the same stars I'd seen from my family's estate. But they looked different from here. Brighter, maybe. Or perhaps I was different. Seeing them with new eyes, tomorrow would bring new challenges, more tests, more people determined to prove I didn't belong. But tonight I'd proven something to myself. I was stronger than I'd thought. Adaptable, like Ronan said, capable of surviving in this world of wolves, even without claws of my own. I closed my eyes and let exhaustion pull me under. Dreaming of stone palaces and winter gold eyes, and a future I was slowly beginning to believe I could actually claim. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity that left me dizzy. Days started early meetings with Margaret about household management sessions, with the seamstresses who fussed over my coronation gown, lessons in court protocol from a stern older woman who tutted at my every mistake. I learned which fork to use at formal dinners, how to address visiting dignitaries, the proper way to enter a room, so my presence commanded attention. I studied constantly. The books Margaret had provided became my constant companions: histories of the royal family, biographies of former queens, detailed breakdowns of current political alliances. I memorized names and faces, territorial boundaries, trade agreements, the complex web of favors and debts that governed court interactions, and I attended functions. So many functions: dinners with visiting packs, afternoon teas with influential ladies, strategy meetings with the council where I mostly listened and learned. Each one was a performance, a careful dance of saying the right thing to the right person at the right time. Ronan was there for most of it, a steady presence at my elbow, guiding when I needed direction, stepping back when I could handle things myself. We fell into a rhythm, learning each other's signals, developing a wordless communication that made navigating court politics slightly less terrifying. He kept his promises. I had autonomy in my quarters. He never entered without invitation. I had access to the archives where I spent late nights reading by candlelight, absorbing the history I'd need to rule effectively. And he listened when I spoke. Actually considered my observations about court dynamics and political maneuvering. We worked well together. We were becoming genuine partners, but we weren't becoming anything more. Our interactions remained professional, cordial, strategically coordinated. He didn't share personal stories beyond what was necessary. I didn't ask about his late mate, about the grief I sometimes saw flash across his face when he thought no one was watching. We kept our walls intact, our distance maintained, our hearts carefully protected until the night. Everything changed. It was 12 days before the coronation. I'd spent the afternoon in another tedious meeting about ceremonial protocols, then retreated to the archives for some blessed solitude. I was deep in a fascinating account of the third king's reign when I heard footsteps on the stairs, too heavy to be servants, too purposeful to be casual. Ronan appeared in the doorway, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. "We need to talk." "That sounds ominous." "It is." He entered, closed the door behind him, unusual since we typically left it open for propriety. "I received word today from the Eastern Territories. There's been an incident." I set down the book. "What kind of incident?" "The kind that requires my immediate presence. A border dispute has escalated into violence. 3 packs are on the brink of war, and if I don't intervene personally, it could destabilize the entire region." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd rarely seen from him. "I need to leave tonight." "For how long?" "Minimum 2 weeks, possibly longer, depending on how complicated the negotiations become." 2 weeks. The coronation was in 12 days. "Will you be back in time for the coronation?" The question came out smaller than I intended. His expression softened. "That's why I came to find you. We need to discuss options." My heart sank. You want to postpone it? I don't want to, but the council is suggesting it might be necessary. He moved closer, sat across from me at the reading table. Tradition dictates that the king performs the coronation ceremony personally. If I'm not here, then I can't become queen. I understood the implications. And if the coronation is postponed, it sends a message to the court that I'm not a priority, that political crises matter more than legitimizing my position. Exactly. He looked genuinely frustrated. Ria, I'm sorry. This timing is disastrous. But the Eastern situation, if it explodes into full war, hundreds could die. I can't ignore it. He was right. Of course, a king's duty to his people had to supersede ceremonial timing. But the thought of facing the court for weeks longer, without the official authority of the crown, of giving Voss and others more time to undermine me. What if, I said slowly, thinking it through, you performed the coronation before you left? Tonight or tomorrow, a private ceremony, small and quick, just enough to make it official. Then when you return, we can have the public celebration the court expects. Ronan was quiet, considering that's actually brilliant. It would give you legitimate authority while I'm gone, protect you from anyone who might try to take advantage of my absence, and it satisfies the legal requirements. Coronations don't have to be public to be binding. Hope sparked. So we could do it? We could. But his expression was still troubled. There's one complication. What? What? The coronation ceremony includes the marriage vows. They're part of the same ritual. You're crowned as my queen and my wife simultaneously. If we do this tonight, Reina, we're not just moving up the coronation. We're getting married. The words hung between us, heavy with implications. Married, not betrothed, not engaged. Actually, legally, permanently married. 12 days earlier than planned. No grand ceremony. No celebration. No time to mentally prepare for the finality of it. I know it's not ideal, Ronan continued. I know you expected more time. But if we're going to do this at all, it needs to be now. I leave at dawn. I thought of the alternative weeks alone in the palace without official authority, facing the court's judgment, dealing with challenges to my position while Ronan was gone. Thought of Voss and his political maneuvering, of the whispers that would grow louder in the king's absence. And I thought of Ronan's promise. We're partners. I'll protect you. This was protection. Messy, rushed, imperfect, but real. All right, I heard myself say, let's do it tonight. His eyebrows rose. You're sure? I'm terrified. But yes, I'm sure. I managed a shaky smile. Besides, I've already been through one wedding where I watched from the sidelines. Might as well experience my own, even if it's abbreviated. Something flickered in his expression. Respect maybe, or gratitude. I'll make the arrangements. We'll need witnesses. I'll ask Margaret and Commander Thie. Both are trustworthy. The ceremony itself takes about 20 minutes. We can do it in the private chapel at midnight. Midnight? Less than 3 hours away. What do I need to do? Just be there. Margaret will help you prepare. He stood, moved toward the door, then paused. Ria, thank you for being flexible, for understanding. That's what partners do. I echoed his earlier words. His smile was brief but genuine. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with ancient books, and the stunning realization that in 3 hours, I'd be married to a king I barely knew, who'd promised me everything except the one thing most brides wanted. Love. I pressed my hands against the cool stone of the reading table and tried to steady my breathing. You survived your family. You survived the reception. You'll survive this. I'd survive. I had to. Chapter 7. The Midnight Vows. Margaret arrived at my quarters within minutes of Ronan leaving, her severe expression somehow even more intense than usual. His Majesty informed me of the change in plans. She said without preamble, already moving toward my wardrobe, "We have 2 and 1/2 hours to make you look like a queen being crowned, not a girl being rushed into marriage. Come." She pulled out a gown I'd never seen before. Pure white silk that seemed to glow in the candlelight, simpler than the elaborate coronation dress that had been planned, but no less beautiful. The bodice was fitted, embroidered with silver wolves that seemed to move when the fabric shifted. The skirt fell in clean lines to the floor, elegant in its restraint. "When did this arrive?" I asked, running my fingers over the silk. 3 days ago. His Majesty commissioned it as a backup in case the formal gown wasn't ready in time. Seems his paranoia paid off. She began unlacing my day dress with efficient movements. The seamstress will have fits that it's being used for the actual ceremony instead of just fittings, but that's not our concern. I let her work, my mind spinning. Ronan had planned ahead, anticipated complications. It was so perfectly practical, so thoroughly him preparing for problems before they arose, protecting against contingencies. "Margaret," I said as she began fastening the wedding gown. "Have you seen many royal weddings?" 4. She adjusted the shoulder seams, including King Ronan's first. My hands stilled. "What was it like, his marriage to Julie?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her fingers working the tiny buttons along my spine. "It was the happiest day of his life and the beginning of his greatest tragedy. Though we didn't know it then. Tell me about her. Please, I need to understand what I'm walking into." "You're walking into a marriage that looks nothing like his first one, which is precisely why he chose you." She moved around to face me, adjusting the neckline. "But yes, I'll tell you. You deserve to know." She guided me to sit, then began working on my hair. Nothing elaborate, just soft waves pinned back to expose my face, my neck, making me look young and vulnerable, and somehow regal all at once. Julie was the daughter of the Western Pax Alpha. Margaret began, her voice taking on the cadence of storytelling. She and Ronan met at a diplomatic summit. He was 25, recently crowned after his father's death. She was 22, beautiful in that delicate way that made men want to protect her. The mate bond snapped between them instantly. Her hands moved through my hair with practiced efficiency. The wedding was enormous. 3 days of celebration. Every pack in the kingdom represented. She wore a dress that took 6 months to make, covered in pearls and diamonds. She glowed with happiness. And Ronan, Margaret's voice softened. I'd never seen him smile like that before or since, like she'd brought light into places that had been dark his entire life. The image formed in my mind. Ronan, young and in love, unguarded, happy, so different from the controlled, walled-off man I knew. They had 2 years together, Margaret continued. Good years. She softened his edges, made him laugh, reminded him there was more to life than duty. The palace felt different when she was here, warmer somehow. Staff loved her because she remembered names, asked about families, genuinely cared. She began adding small white flowers to my hair, mountain blossoms that smelled of snow and stone. Then she got pregnant and everything changed. Ronan said the pregnancy was difficult. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it. Margaret's hands stilled. Julie was always delicate, but carrying a shifter child, it nearly killed her from the first month. She could barely eat, could barely move. The healers said her body wasn't strong enough, that the child was taking everything from her. They recommended ending the pregnancy. My chest tightened, but she refused. She refused, said giving the king an heir was her duty, her purpose, that she'd rather die having fulfilled that purpose than live knowing she'd failed him. Margaret's voice went hard. Ronan begged her to reconsider, told her he'd rather have her alive than any heir. But she wouldn't listen. She was convinced that her value lay in providing him a child. That's heartbreaking. It was, and it got worse. The pregnancy lasted 7 months. She went into early labor. For 3 days, she fought. The child was stillborn, a boy who never took a breath, and Julie, Margaret's voice cracked just slightly. She held on long enough to see the baby, to tell Ronan she was sorry for failing him. Then she died in his arms. Tears burned my eyes. How did he survive that? Barely. For weeks he locked himself in his quarters. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't see anyone, wouldn't rule. The council nearly declared him unfit. But eventually he came out, changed. All the softness Julie had cultivated gone, replaced by stone and duty and absolute control. She stepped back, examining her work. That's who you're marrying tonight, Rhina. A man who loved so completely that losing it nearly destroyed him. A man who built walls so high that nothing can reach him anymore. Don't expect him to let you in. Don't expect warmth or romance, or any of the things young women dream of in marriage. I don't, I said quietly. He's been very clear about what this is. Good. She handed me a small mirror. Because if you expect more, you'll break your heart against those walls, and I've seen enough broken hearts in this palace to last several lifetimes. I looked at. My reflection barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked older than 23, more composed, ethereal in the white gown with flowers in her hair. She looked like someone who could be a queen. She looked like she had no idea what she was doing. One more thing, Margaret said, producing a small velvet box. Queen Julie's coronation crown. Traditionally, it passes to the next queen. She opened the box, revealing a circlet of silver so delicate it seemed like it might dissolve if touched. Small diamonds caught the light, arranged in patterns that suggested stars or snowflakes or both. It's beautiful, I breathed. It was made for her, specifically designed to look fragile, feminine, unthreatening, exactly what everyone expected of her. Margaret's expression was unreadable. The question is, what will they make for you? I don't know yet. Neither do they, which is why you're dangerous. She set the box aside. This crown is just for tonight. Your official coronation crown is being forged now, and it will be entirely different, stronger. But for the ceremony, you'll wear Julie's. It's tradition. I touched the circlet gently, feeling the weight of history, of the woman who'd worn it before me, who'd loved Ronan completely and died, trying to give him something he'd never asked for. I won't make her mistakes, I promised silently. I won't destroy myself trying to be something I'm not. It's time, Margaret said. The chapel is ready. The private chapel was hidden deep in the oldest part of the palace, a small stone room with a ceiling carved to look like night sky. Stars painted in silver leaf that gleamed in the candlelight. An altar stood at the far end covered in white cloth. And before it waited 3 people, Ronan, Commander Thane, and a priest I didn't recognize. Ronan had changed into ceremonial robes, black and silver, formal without being ostentatious. The king's crown sat on his head, heavy and ancient. But it was his expression that caught me, controlled carefully, blank, but something underneath tension perhaps, or grief, or both. When I entered, his eyes found mine and held. Whatever he was feeling, he locked it away. Commander Thne bowed stiffly. Miss Gates, Commander. The priest stepped forward, elderly, with kind eyes that had seen too much. Your Majesty, Miss Gates, shall we begin? Yes, Ronan said. Let's make this official. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't emotional. It was practical. 2 people executing a necessary ritual to protect political positions. Exactly what we'd agreed to. The priest gestured for us to approach the altar. Ronan offered his hand. I took it. His grip was warm, steady, grounding. We gathered tonight for a sacred purpose, the priest began, his voice echoing off stone walls. To crown a queen and seal a marriage before the moon goddess and pack law. Though this ceremony is private, it is no less binding. What is done here tonight cannot be undone. He looked at both of us. Do you understand? Yes, we answered in unison. The priest nodded. Then began the ritual. Ancient words in the old language that most shifters had forgotten, but that resonated with power anyway. He called upon the moon goddess to witness, upon the spirits of past kings to bless, upon the mountains themselves to remember. Then he turned to Ronan. Your Majesty, do you take this woman as your queen, your wife, your partner in all things? Do you vow to protect her, honor her, and share your crown and your burden with her until death claims you both? Ronan's gold eyes were steady on mine. I do. And do you, Rhina Gates, accept this crown and this king? Do you vow to rule justly? To honor your people, to stand beside him in times of peace and war, until death claims you both? My voice came out clear, strong. I do. Then by the authority granted to me by the moon goddess and pack law, I pronounce you king and queen, husband and wife, bound until the end of your days. The priest lifted Julie's crown from its velvet cushion. Kneel, Reyna Gates, I knelt, feeling the cold stone through my silk gown. The priest looked at Ronan. Your Majesty, as the reigning monarch, it falls to you to crown your queen. Ronan took the cirlet, that delicate thing that had adorned Julie's head, that carried the weight of his greatest loss, and stepped closer. For just a moment, something cracked in his expression, pain, raw, and devastating, that he couldn't quite hide. He was placing his dead mate's crown on his new wife's head, replacing one woman with another, making physical the betrayal his heart probably screamed was unforgivable. Ronan, I whispered so quietly only he could hear. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice was rough. This is duty. We both understand duty. He placed the crown on my head, gentle, reverent, like handling something sacred and broken. It settled into place, surprisingly heavy for something so delicate. Rise, Queen Reyna. The priest in rise and claim your place. I stood, the crown solid and real on my head. Ronan's hand found mine again, and together we turned to face our tiny audience, Margaret, Thane, and the priest. 3 witnesses to a marriage that would reshape the kingdom. It's done, Ronan said flatly. Margaret, prepare the official documents for the council's review at first light. Commander Thane, double the Queen's Guard effective immediately. She's to have the same protection I do. They bowed. Understanding this was a dismissal. The priest approached, carrying a leather-bound registry. If you'll sign your Majesties, making it official in writing as well as word. We signed my handwriting next to Ronan's in the book that contained every royal marriage for 1,000 years. My name suddenly carrying weight it had never had before. Renegade's Blackthorn, Queen of all packs. The priest closed the book with finality. May the moon goddess bless your union and your reign. He bowed and left, taking Thane and Margaret with him. And suddenly we were alone, husband and wife, king and queen. 2 people who'd promised each other everything except love. Ronan removed his crown first, set it on the altar with more force than necessary. Then, he reached up and removed the cirlet from my head. You answer this well, he said quietly, studying it. Julie would have understood why I had to do this. I'm sorry, I said. I know tonight was difficult for you. Wearing her crown, saying those vows again. Don't. He set the cirlet down gently like it might shatter. Don't apologize for circumstances neither of us created. This isn't your fault, Rhea. It's just complicated. Complicated is an understatement. He turned to face me fully, and in his expression I saw exhaustion, grief, and something else. Something that might have been gratitude or respect or recognition that we were both survivors trying to navigate impossible situations. We're married, he said, like he was still processing it. We are. How do you feel? The question surprised me with its directness. I considered lying, giving him the easy answer, but we'd promised honesty. Terrified, overwhelmed, and strangely relieved that it's done, that I'm officially protected now. I met his eyes. How do you feel? Like I've betrayed someone who can't forgive me. The words came out raw, unfiltered. Like I've taken something that belonged to her and given it to someone else. Even though intellectually I know that's not fair to either of you, that Julie is gone, that you deserve this position, that we made the right strategic choice. But emotions aren't logical. I reached out, touched his arm the first time I'd initiated physical contact. She's not betrayed. You did what you had to do to protect your kingdom to survive. That's not betrayal. That's living, is it? His voice was bitter because it feels like I'm just going through motions, performing duties, existing without actually being alive. The vulnerability in those words cracked something open between us. The careful, professional distance we'd maintained, shattering into something more honest, more painful. Then we're both ghosts, I said quietly, going through motions, performing roles, surviving rather than living. Maybe that's all we can do right now. He looked at me for a long moment. You understand? That's why this works. We both understand what it means to lose everything and keep going anyway. Yes. We stood in the candle-lit chapel, newly married, facing truths neither of us wanted to acknowledge. That we were both broken, both surviving, both going through motions, because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. I leave at dawn, Ronan said finally. I'll be gone at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. I know the council will test you in my absence. Voss especially. Don't let them intimidate you. You have full authority now, legal and binding. If anyone questions it, refer them to the documents. He paused. And Reyna, if anything happens, if you need me, if it becomes dangerous, send word immediately. I'll come back. Nothing will happen. I'll be fine. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise you won't take unnecessary risks just to prove yourself. The concern in his voice was unexpected, touching. I promise. And Ronan, promise me you'll come back safely. That you won't take unnecessary risks just to escape this. His expression shifted recognition that I'd seen through him. Understood that part of him wanted to throw himself into danger rather than face what he'd just done. I promise, he said finally. We left the chapel together, walking through silent corridors back toward our suites. The palace felt different now, like it recognized something had changed, that I'd crossed some invisible threshold from guest to owner. At the connecting door between our quarters, Ronan paused. This wasn't the wedding you probably imagined as a girl. No, I admitted, but it was honest. That's worth more than romance right now, is it? Ask me in a year. His smile was brief, sad. Good night, Reyna, Queen Reyna. Good night, Ronan. He disappeared into his suite. I entered mine, removed the white gown carefully, and climbed into bed, still wearing the simple chemise underneath. I was married, Queen. Everything had changed in a midnight ceremony that had taken less than 30 minutes, and tomorrow my husband would leave, and I'd face the court alone. I pressed my fingers against my lips, remembering the brief kiss Ronan had given me at the ceremony's end. Cold, formal, perfunctory, nothing like the kiss Carol had given Celeste at their wedding, full of passion and promise. But then, this wasn't that kind of marriage. This was survival wrapped in silk and silver, strategic alliance, dressed up as sacred union. It would have to be enough. It was enough. I closed my eyes and tried to convince myself that was true. Dawn came too quickly. I'd barely slept, my mind churning through everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. When I finally gave up on rest and dressed for the day, the sky was just beginning to lighten pale gray, replacing black stars fading into memory. I made my way to the courtyard where Ronan would depart, wrapped in a cloak against the morning chill. His traveling party was already assembled, a dozen guards, several advisors, horses stamping impatiently in the cold. Ronan stood at the center, giving final instructions to Commander Thni. He'd changed back into practical traveling clothes, the king's crowns replaced by simple functionality. But even in plain garments, his authority was unmistakable. He saw me approaching and broke away from the group. You're awake early, he observed. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd see you off. I pulled the cloak tighter. How long is the journey to the Eastern Territories? 4 days hard riding. Then however long negotiations take. He studied my face. You look exhausted, so do you. Fair enough. He glanced back at his waiting party. I need to go, but Reyna, remember what I said. Don't let them intimidate you. You're queen now with all the authority that entails. Use it. I will. He hesitated, then surprising us both, I think pulled me into a brief embrace. It was awkward, formal, but his arms were solid around me, grounding. Be safe, I whispered against his shoulder. You too. He released me, stepped back, his expression carefully neutral again. Then he mounted his horse in one fluid motion. raised his hand in signal, and the party moved out. Hooves clattering on stone, echoing off palace walls, fading into the distance. I watched until they disappeared around the mountain path, until even the echo of their departure was swallowed by morning. Then I turned back toward the palace, this massive stone fortress that was now mine to navigate, mine to rule, mine to survive. You've survived worse, I reminded myself. But I'd survived being broken, being disposable, being overlooked. This was different. This was being thrust into power without preparation, expected to command people who wanted me to fail, while the only person who'd promised to protect me was 4 days right away. The palace loomed before me, beautiful and terrifying, home and prison. I lifted my chin, straightened my spine, and walked back inside. I was Queen Rhaena now. Time to figure out what that meant. Chapter 8. The Queen's Trial. The first week of Ronan's absence passed in a haze of meetings, decisions, and endless tests of my authority. The council convened daily, ostensibly to brief me on kingdom affairs, but actually to assess whether I was competent enough to be left in charge. They questioned every decision I made, challenged my interpretations of Pak law, suggested always politely, always with respect, that felt like mockery, that perhaps certain matters should wait for the king's return. I held firm, cited precedent, made decisions that were legally sound, even if they made me unpopular, and slowly, grudgingly, some of them began to take me seriously. But not Voss, never Voss. He attended every meeting with barely concealed contempt, his questions designed to make me look ignorant, his suggestions always undermining my authority, and because he was technically respectful, never crossing into outright insubordination. I couldn't call him out without looking petty or insecure. It was a masterclass in subtle warfare, and I was losing ground daily. On the 8th day of Ronan's absence, everything came to a head. I was in the council chamber, a room designed for intimidation with high ceilings, and a massive table where I sat at the head. Ronan's empty seat beside me, a constant reminder of my isolation. The morning's agenda had been routine. Trade disputes, border patrol reports, budget allocations. Then Voss stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Your Majesty," he said, his tone dripping false courtesy. If I may raise a matter of some urgency, I gestured for him to continue, already tensing for whatever attack he'd planned. "News has reached us from the southern territories. Alpha Thorin Gates. Your father has fallen ill, gravely so. His pack requests your presence too. Say goodbye should the worst occur." The words hit like a physical blow. My father dying. The man who'd raised me, disappointed in me, ultimately traded me away, but still my father. Around the table, council members exchanged glances. Some looked sympathetic. Others, like Voss, looked calculating. "When did this news arrive?" I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Last night. The messenger is waiting for your response." Voss leaned forward. "Of course, as queen, you cannot simply leave the capital without the king's permission. But as a daughter, surely you understand the need to see your dying father. It's quite the dilemma. There it was the trap. If I left, I'd be abandoning my post, suggesting the kingdom was less important than personal matters. But if I stayed, I'd look heartless, cold, unfilling. Either way, I'd lose credibility." "What is the nature of his illness?" I asked, buying time to think. "The reports are unclear. Some kind of seizure followed by paralysis. The healers aren't optimistic." Voss's expression was sympathetic, but his eyes gleamed with malice. "I'm sure you're devastated." "Of course she is," Lord Hadrian interjected. "This is her father, your Majesty. Perhaps we could arrange an escort, a brief visit, properly chaperoned to fulfill your filial duties." It was a reasonable suggestion, and I almost accepted it. Then I caught something in Voss's expression, satisfaction, like I was doing exactly what he'd expected. This wasn't just about my father. This was about getting me out of the capital, away from my authority, vulnerable. "No," I said firmly. Voss's eyebrows rose. No, I will send healers from the royal medical staff, the best we have. I'll send supplies. Money, whatever my father's pack needs. But I will not leave the capital during the king's absence. My duty to the kingdom supersedes personal matters. Gasps rippled around the table. Lady Seraphine looked scandalized. Your Majesty, he's your father, your family. Huh? And I am queen of all pack snows. Every alpha, every pack member is my responsibility. I cannot abandon thousands for the sake of one, even if that one is my father. I held Voss's gaze. My family will understand that duty comes first. They raised me to understand that the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The family that had taught me I was worthless for failing to shift would now be reminded that I took duty seriously enough to sacrifice personal grief for the kingdom's stability. How very cold, Voss said softly. One might think you didn't care at all. One might think I understand what it means to be queen, I countered. To make difficult choices for the greater good. If you interpret duty as coldness, Lord Voss, perhaps you don't understand leadership as well as you think you do. His expression hardened around the table. Several council members looked impressed. Hurrian actually smiled, brief but genuine. Very well, Voss said tightly. If that's your decision, it is. Commander Thani, please arrange for our best healers to leave for the Southern Territories immediately and send word to my mother that she has the Crown's full support and resources. I stood, signaling the meeting's end. Now, unless there are other urgent matters, I have work to attend to. They filed out, some bowing with new respect, others like Voss radiating barely suppressed anger. Only Margaret remained, waiting until the room emptied. That was well done, she said quietly. Voss was trying to manipulate you into leaving so he could undermine your authority in your absence. You saw through it. Was I wrong? The question burst out. Should I have gone to see my father? I don't know. Margaret's expression was unusually gentle. But I know that if you'd left, Voss would have spent your absence convincing the council that you were unfit, that the king made a mistake, that you were too young and weak to rule. By the time you returned, your position would have been destroyed. She was right. I knew she was right. But it didn't ease the guilt churning in my stomach. What if he dies? I whispered. What if I never see him again? And the last conversation we had was him telling me to make myself presentable for a king I didn't want to marry. Then you'll live with that regret as we all live with our regrets. Margaret moved toward the door. But you'll live with it as queen with power and authority. That has to count for something. She left me alone in the council chamber, surrounded by the ghosts of decisions that had shaped kingdoms. Feeling the weight of the crown, still metaphorical, still months away from its final forging, pressing down on me with crushing force. I'd made the right political choice, but I wasn't sure it was the right human one. 3 days later, news arrived that my father had recovered. The healers I'd sent reported it was a mild seizure, not life-threatening, though he'd need time to fully recuperate. The relief was overwhelming. I hadn't killed him through neglect. Hadn't sacrificed my last chance to reconcile on the altar of political strategy. But the damage to my relationship with my family was done. My mother sent a brief letter, coldly formal, thanking me for the healers, but noting my absence had been noticed and discussed. Celeste wrote, too, her hurt evident in every line. I know you're queen now, Ray, but he's still our father. How could you not come? I wanted to explain. Wanted to make them understand the impossible position I'd been in, the trap Voss had set, the necessity of putting the kingdom first. But they wouldn't understand. They'd never had to choose between duty and love. Never had to sacrifice personal feelings for political survival. So I filed their letters away and tried not to think about the growing distance between us. The council's respect for me increased after that incident. Even Voss backed off, his challenges less frequent, his respect marginally more genuine. I'd proven I could make hard decisions, that I wouldn't be manipulated by emotional appeals. I'd proven I could be the queen they needed, even if it cost me the daughter they'd wanted. On the 15th day of Ronan's absence, everything changed again. I was in the shared study, the room connecting my quarters to Ronan's, lined with books and maps and correspondence that piled up daily. I'd taken to working there late at night when the palace was quiet and I could think without interruption. I was reading reports from the Eastern Territories. Ronan's negotiations were progressing. But slowly, when the door burst open, Commander Thenny stood there. His usual composure shattered into something close to panic. "Your Majesty, you need to come now." My blood went cold. What's happened? The southern border. There's been an attack, raiders from the unclaimed territories. They've taken hostages, killed guards, and they're demanding to negotiate with the crown. He was already moving, expecting me to follow. "We have maybe an hour before they start executing prisoners." I ran after him, my mind racing. This wasn't in any protocol I'd studied, any scenario I'd prepared for. This was real, immediate, deadly. "Where's the king's representative?" I asked as we rushed through corridors. "Who handles border crises?" "The king does, or in his absence, the queen." Fane's expression was grim. "That's you, Your Majesty. This is your call." We reached the war room, a space I'd never entered before, dominated by a massive table covered in maps, currently surrounded by military commanders who all turned when I entered, their expressions ranging from hopeful to skeptical. "Report," I commanded, channeling every ounce of authority I possessed. A grizzled commander stepped forward. 30 raiders crossed the southern border 3 hours ago. They hit a small settlement, killed 5 guards, took 12 hostages, including children. They're demanding safe passage through our territory, supplies, and gold. If we refuse, they start killing hostages at dawn. Dawn, less than an hour away. What are our options? Limited, Your Majesty. We have forces nearby, but attacking risks the hostages. Negotiating sets a precedent that raiders can extort the crown, and we can't reach King Ronan in time for guidance. Every face in the room was watching me, waiting for a decision that could save lives, or cost them, that would define my reign in blood and fire. "Think," I commanded myself. What would Ronan do? But Ronan wasn't here. This was mine to handle. For better or worse, do we know who these raiders are? Where they came from? Best intelligence suggests they're remnants of the disbanded Shadow Pack. No alpha, no structure, just survivors turned desperate. Why Shadow Pack? I'd read about them in the archives. A pack destroyed 15 years ago for breaking sacred laws. Their members scattered and forbidden from joining other packs. They'd been living as outlaws ever since, growing increasingly desperate. An idea formed, dangerous and possibly insane. "I'll negotiate," I said. The room erupted in protests. "Your Majesty, absolutely not. Too dangerous. The king would never allow." "The king isn't here," I said sharply, cutting through the chaos. "I am, and I'm queen. Negotiations are within my authority." I turned to Thane. "How many guards can you assemble in 30 minutes? 50? Maybe 60? Do it. Full armor, weapons ready, but held at a distance. I want an overwhelming show of force, but not aggressive." I looked at the assembled commanders. I'm going to offer them something they don't expect. "What?" Fane asked. "A choice. Safe passage in exchange for the hostages, but only if they agree to pack trials. If they're truly desperate survivors rather than murderers, they can petition to join existing packs, regain legitimacy. But they do it through proper channels, not extortion." It was risky. It set a precedent, but one of mercy combined with law, not weakness. "And if they refuse," one commander asked, "then we have 60 armed guards ready to end this by force. But we give them the choice first." I met each commander's eyes in turn. "Do I have your support?" Slowly, uncertainly, they nodded. "Then let's move. We have 40 minutes. The southern border was a 2-hour ride at normal pace. We made it in 1, pushing the horses to their limits. Arriving just as dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of blood and gold. The raider camp was makeshift rough tents arranged around a central fire. Figures moving with the nervous energy of people who knew they were cornered. And kneeling in the dirt, bound and terrified, were the hostages. I counted 12 faces, men, women, children, all staring at our approaching force with desperate hope. The raiders scrambled to defensive positions, weapons drawn. Their leader stepped forward, a woman, surprisingly, with scars crossing her face and eyes that had seen too much violence. "That's far enough," she shouted. "Come closer and the hostages die." I dismounted, ignoring Thane's protest. "I'm Queen Rhea. I'm here to negotiate." Shock rippled through the raider camp, whatever they'd expected. It wasn't the queen herself. "You came," the leader said, her voice carrying disbelief and suspicion. "Why?" "Because you asked to negotiate with the crown. I'm the crown in the king's absence. So, let's negotiate." I walked forward slowly, hands visible, unarmed, until I was close enough to see the desperation in her scarred face. "Stay back." She raised her blade, rusty, chipped, barely serviceable. "I'm unarmed. I'm here to listen." I stopped at what felt like safe distance. "Your Shadow Pack remnants. Survivors of the disbanding, living outside pack law for 15 years. You're desperate, starving, and you saw a chance to force the crown to acknowledge you. Am I right?" The leader's expression flickered, surprised that I understood. "You're right," she said finally. "We're dying out here. Can't hunt in pack territories without being killed. Can't trade because no one trusts outlaws. We're not murderers, we're survivors. But surviving is getting harder every year. Then stop surviving illegally and petition for reinstatement." We tried that. Every pack we approached rejected us. They say Shadow Pack sins can't be forgiven. Then petition the crown directly. Pack law allows for special dispensation from the monarchy in cases of extreme hardship. I kept my voice steady, reasonable. "I'm offering you that chance. Release the hostages now unharmed, and you have my word. You'll get fair trials. Each of you can petition to join existing packs. If you're found worthy, you'll be reinstated with full legal protection. And if we're not found worthy, then you face justice for the murders you committed tonight. But at least you'll face it through legal channels, not as outlaws hunted like animals." Silence. The raiders exchanged glances, weighing hope against cynicism, legal chance against continued desperation. "Why should we trust you?" the leader asked. "You're a queen, we're nothing. You're pack members who made mistakes and got caught in consequences not entirely of your making. Shadowpack's crimes were committed by your alphas, not by all of you. That's not justice. That's collective punishment. I can't change the past, but I can offer you a chance at a different future." I took a step closer. "I'm offering you what I needed once. Someone willing to see past what you're supposed to be to what you actually are. Someone willing to give you a chance, despite everyone saying you don't deserve it." The truth in those words resonated. I saw it in her expression, the recognition that I understood that I wasn't just performing political theater. "We release the hostages," she said slowly. "You guarantee safe passage to the capital for trials." "I guarantee it, on my authority as queen." She looked back at her people, 30 desperate souls who'd been living as ghosts for 15 years. Then she lowered her weapon. "Release them," she commanded. The hostages were untied, stumbling forward into the waiting arms of the guards I'd brought, crying, thanking whatever gods they believed in, collapsing with relief. And the raiders stood weaponless, vulnerable, waiting to see if I'd keep my word, or if this had all been a trick to get them to surrender. I turned to Commander Thane. "Escort our guests to the capital. See that they're housed, fed, and treated with the dignity pack law requires for those awaiting trial. Anyone who harms them answers to me personally." Thane looked like he wanted to argue, but he bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." I turned back to the raider leader. "What's your name?" "Kira." "Kira, you took a tremendous risk trusting me. I won't waste that trust. You'll get your trials fairly administered. What happens after that is up to you and the packs who hear your petitions. Why? The question came out raw. Why help us? We're criminals, outlaws, because everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Even people the world has written off as broken. I held her gaze, especially them. Understanding flickered in her scarred face recognition that I was talking about myself as much as her. Thank you, Your Majesty. I nodded, then walked back to my horse, every muscle shaking with delayed fear and adrenaline. I'd just negotiated a hostage crisis successfully, without consulting anyone, without the king's permission, on nothing but instinct and a belief that mercy could be strategic. I'd either saved lives and created a historic precedent for rehabilitation, or I'd made a catastrophic mistake that would haunt my reign forever. Only time would tell which. We returned to the capital by mid-afternoon, exhausted and filthy. The hostages were reunited with their families. The raiders were housed in secure but comfortable quarters, awaiting the trials I'd promised, and word of what had happened spread through the palace like wildfire. By the time I reached my quarters, the council was already assembling for an emergency session. I changed quickly, washing blood and dirt from the journey, pulling on formal robes that proclaimed my authority. Then I walked into that council chamber, with my spine straight and my expression calm, ready for whatever came next. The reaction was immediate and polarized. Your Majesty, what you did was reckless. Lady Seraphine was on her feet, face flushed. You could have been killed. The king will be furious. The king isn't here, I said coolly, taking my seat at the table's head. I am, and I made the decision I believed was correct. You negotiated without laws. Another council member protested. You offered them legal protections they forfeited 15 years ago. I offered them trials, which pack law allows. If they're guilty of crimes beyond their pack's original sins, they'll face justice. But if they're simply survivors caught in an unfair situation, they deserve a chance at redemption. That's not weakness. That's mercy tempered with law. It sets a dangerous precedent, Voss said, his voice carefully neutral. Every outlaw group will now think they can extort the crown for favorable treatment. Only if they're willing to submit to legal trials and potentially face execution if found guilty, I countered. This isn't a free pass. It's a calculated risk with severe consequences for failure. That's not extortion. That's justice. Lord Hadrian leaned forward. Your Majesty, I must admit, this was brilliantly handled. Risky, yes. Unconventional, certainly, but you saved 12 lives. Captured 30 outlaws who've been evading justice for years, and you did it without bloodshed. That's remarkable leadership. Other council members murmured. Agreement not universal but growing. The question, Hadrian continued, is what the king will think when he returns. You acted without his knowledge or permission. Some might interpret that as overstepping. I acted within my authority as queen during the king's absence. Pack law is clear on this. In times of crisis, the ranking monarch present makes decisions. That was me. I held his gaze. If the king disagrees with my choices, he and I will discuss it privately. But I won't apologize for saving lives. Well said. Your Majesty, Hadrian murmured, and I caught approval in his eyes. Voss said nothing, but his expression was calculating, reassessing, perhaps, what kind of queen I actually was. The council debated for another hour. Logistics of the trials, security concerns, political implications, but the fundamental decision was made. We'd proceed with the trials, honor my word, and face whatever consequences came. By the time the meeting ended, I was so exhausted I could barely stand. Margaret found me in the corridor outside. You look half dead, feel fully dead. Come, you need food and rest. She guided me back toward my quarters. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Dangerous, but right. Tell me that if I've started a war, you won't. You showed strength and mercy in equal measure. That's what queens do. She paused at my door. The king returns tomorrow. His messenger arrived while you were at the border. Hell be here by midday. Tomorrow, I'd face Ronan and explain what I'd done. Hope he understood. Pray I hadn't destroyed everything we'd built. Thank you, Margaret. She left and I collapsed into bed, still wearing my formal robes, too tired to even undress. Tomorrow everything would change again. Tomorrow I discover whether I'd been strong or foolish, whether mercy was wisdom or weakness. Tomorrow my husband, the king I barely knew, but had somehow started to trust, would return and render judgment on the queen I'd become in his absence. I closed my eyes and let exhaustion pull me under, dreaming of scarred faces and desperate choices and the weight of a crown I was still learning to carry. Epilogue: The Queen's Crown. 8 months has passed since the midnight coronation. 8 months of trials and triumphs, of learning to rule and learning to trust, of slowly transforming from strangers, bound by necessity, into partners bound by choice. The outlaw trials had concluded successfully. Kira and most of her group had been accepted into various packs, their reintegration becoming a landmark precedent for rehabilitation over perpetual punishment. A few had been found guilty of crimes beyond survival and faced justice accordingly. But the majority had been given the second chance I'd promised, and the kingdom was stronger for it. My formal coronation crown had been completed, not delicate like Julie's, but strong, bold, forged in silver and black iron, with wolves that looked powerful rather than decorative. It sat in my quarters now, a physical reminder that I was no longer becoming queen. I was queen. The late autumn afternoon found me in the library. Ronan had given me the one that had become my sanctuary, my workspace, my refuge. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, painting the book-lined walls in shades of amber and gold. I sat at my desk, pen in hand, staring at blank parchment. I'd been trying to write for an hour, but the words wouldn't come. The door opened quietly. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. I'd learned to recognize his footsteps, the particular way he moved through space, the subtle shift in the air when he entered a room. "You're staring at that page like it personally offended you," Ronan observed, moving to stand behind my chair. "It's mocking me, blank and perfect and impossible to fill." His hand settled on my shoulder, warm, grounding, the kind of casual touch that had become natural over months of proximity. "What are you trying to write?" I hesitated, then admitted our story. I thought I wanted to record it, how we met, how this all began. But every time I try to start, it feels wrong, like I'm telling someone else's story, not mine. Maybe because you're trying to tell it from the beginning. He pulled up a chair, sat beside me close enough that our knees touched. "Start from the middle instead. From the moment you realized something had changed. When was that for you?" He was quiet for a moment, considering the night you negotiated with the outlaws. I was writing back, furious and terrified, and suddenly I realized I wasn't just worried about the kingdom's queen. I was worried about you. Specifically, you gold eyes met mine. That's when I knew this had become more than political convenience. My chest tightened with emotion I was still learning to name. For me, it was dinner. That first dinner after you returned, when you didn't just talk at me about politics, but with me. Like my thoughts actually mattered. They do matter. They always have. I know that now. But Ronan, I spent so long being dismissed, being overlooked, that I kept waiting for you to realize you'd made a mistake. Kept waiting for the moment you'd look at me and see what everyone else saw. The broken one, the twin who wasn't enough. His hand moved from my shoulder to cup my face, gently forcing me to look at him. "I need you to hear this, Raina, really hear it. You are not broken. You are not less than. You are exactly who I need you to be: intelligent, courageous, compassionate. You don't need to shift to be worthy. You never did, but I can't give you." My voice cracked. Children, an heir, the one thing every king needs, and I might not be able to provide it. We discussed this before. Carefully avoiding the depth of my fear, the healers couldn't determine if my inability to shift extended to fertility issues, We'd been married 8 months, and I hadn't conceived. Every month that passed felt like another confirmation of my fundamental brokenness. Rhea, his voice was firm but gentle. Look at me, I did, finding his expression serious and achingly soft. Even if we never have biological children, even if the moon goddess never blesses us with that particular gift, you are enough. You are always enough. He took my hand, pressed it over his heart. I married you knowing this might be an issue. I chose you anyway because what you bring to this partnership is worth more than any heir. You're a brilliant queen. You're changing this kingdom for the better. You're teaching me how to lead with mercy instead of just strength. But the council can accept reality or find new employment. I will not. I refuse to make you feel like your value depends on producing children. His jaw tightened. Julie died because she thought her worth lay solely in giving me an heir. I won't lose you to that same poisonous belief. Tears burned my eyes. I'm not going to die, Ronan. I'm just afraid. Afraid that one day you'll resent me for this, that you'll wish you'd chosen differently. Never. The word was absolute. And Raina, there are other options. Adoption, fostering. The kingdom is full of children who need homes, who need love. If we're meant to be parents, we'll find a way. But if we're not, if it's just us building this kingdom together, that's enough, too. You're enough. The words cracked something open inside me. Some last wall I've been holding against hope. Say it again, I whispered. Please. You're enough. He pulled me closer until our foreheads touched. You were always enough. From the moment you stood in that chapel and agreed to marry me, knowing exactly what you were getting, a broken king who'd promised you everything except love. You were brave and honest and absolutely terrifying in your strength. And every day since, you've proven that I chose correctly. I thought you couldn't love again, that you'd built walls too high to let anyone in. So did I. His smile was small, vulnerable. Turns out I was wrong. It doesn't feel like it did with Julie. It's different, quieter, less consuming. But Raina, I do love you. Not the same way, but real nonetheless. I love your intelligence and your courage. I love how you see problems I miss and solutions I wouldn't consider. I love that you challenge me, argue with me, refuse to simply agree for the sake of peace. My breath caught. You love me, I love you. He said it firmly, like a vow. I fought it for months, convinced I couldn't survive loving and losing again. But somewhere between your coronation and today, I realized I was already in love with you. Had been for a while, I just hadn't admitted it. I love you too, I whispered, the words feeling both new and ancient. I didn't think I would. Thought I'd be content with partnership and respect. But you made me feel seen. Ronan made me feel like I mattered for who I actually am, not who I was supposed to be. He kissed me then. Not the cold, formal kiss from our wedding, but something warm and real and full of promise. I melted into it, feeling 8 months of careful distance finally dissolving into genuine intimacy. When we pulled apart, he was smiling, a real smile that transformed his entire face. I have something for you, he said, standing and moving to the door. Wait here, he disappeared into the corridor, leaving me slightly dazed, processing the enormity of what had just happened. Ronan loved me, actually loved me. Not just respected or appreciated, but loved. He returned carrying a small wooden box beautifully carved with wolves running through forests. I commissioned this months ago, he said, setting it on my desk. But I was waiting for the right moment. I think this is it. I opened the box carefully. Inside, resting on black velvet, was a crown. But, unlike any I'd seen before, smaller than the formal coronation crown, more delicate, but no less strong. Silver worked into intricate patterns that suggested both strength and grace, and embedded throughout were tiny stones that caught the light. Not diamonds or expensive gems, but simple mountain crystals, the kind found in the peaks surrounding the palace. It's beautiful, I breathed. What's it for? For wearing when you don't want the formal crown's weight. For private moments, intimate gatherings, times when you want to feel like queen without the performance. He lifted it from the box, and I saw the inscription along the inner band. You were always enough. Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. Ronan, may I? He gestured, and I nodded. He placed the crown on my head with the same gentle reverence he'd shown the night of our midnight ceremony. But this time, there was no grief in his expression, only love, clear and bright. Perfect, he murmured. My queen, my partner, my love. I stood, moved into his arms, and let myself finally believe it. That I was worthy, that I was enough. That being broken hadn't made me worthless. It had made me adaptable, strong, capable of building something beautiful from fragments. We stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the library he'd given me, surrounded by books and sunlight, and the quiet certainty that we'd found something rare. A love built on honesty rather than fate, on choice rather than destiny. I have a riddle for you, I said finally, pulling back to look at him. His eyebrows rose. Oh, what grows stronger when broken finds truth in pieces and becomes whole by accepting it never was? He considered, his expression thoughtful. Then understanding dawned, and his smile was warm. Us, I agreed. We're the answer to our own riddle. I like that. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Though I should warn you, I'm going to ask you to marry me again tonight. I laughed, surprised. We're already married. I know, but I want to keep choosing you every day, every night, for the rest of our lives. So, I'll keep asking and you can keep saying yes. Or I could ask you sometimes. Fair is fair. Even better, he pressed a kiss to my forehead, then my nose, then my lips tender and playful. Equal partners in everything, including proposal rights. Through the library windows, I could see the palace grounds, stretching toward mountain peaks, touched with early snow. Beyond them, the kingdom we ruled together, imperfect, complicated, but ours to shape. I thought of the girl I'd been 8 months ago, terrified, broken, convinced she'd never be enough. And I thought of the woman I'd become, still imperfect, still learning, but no longer afraid of being seen. Ronan, I said softly, thank you for what? For seeing past what I couldn't do to what I actually was, for giving me the chance to prove myself, for loving me even though you didn't want to. Thank you for being worth loving. He pulled me close again, and I felt his heartbeat against my chest. Steady, strong, alive. For teaching me that surviving and living aren't the same thing. For showing me that walls can come down without everything collapsing. We stayed like that, as afternoon faded into evening. As sunlight transformed to twilight, as the library filled with shadows that felt comforting rather than ominous. Later, we'd have dinner. Later, we'd discuss kingdom business and council politics, and all the practical matters that filled our days. Later, he'd ask me to marry him again, and I'd say yes with the same joy I'd feel every time he asked. But for now, we simply existed together, two broken people who'd learned to build something whole from their collective damage. A king who'd loved and lost and dared to love again. A queen who'd been told she was worthless and chose to believe differently. And in the space between what we'd been and what we'd become, we'd found something neither of us had expected. Home. Not in the palace's stone walls or formal chambers, but in each other, in honest conversations and shared silences, in respect that had grown into friendship, and friendship that had deepened into love. The girl who couldn't shift had become queen. The king who'd sworn never to love again had found his heart could heal, and together we'd created a story worth writing after all. One that started with brokenness and ended with belonging. That began with survival and concluded with thriving. I removed the small crown, set it carefully back in its box beside my blank parchment. Tomorrow I'd write our story, but tonight I'd simply live it with the man I'd married out of necessity and loved by choice. With my partner, my king, my home together, we'd proven that the most powerful magic wasn't shifting or mate bonds or destiny. It was simply choosing every day to see each other's worth. And that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.